Welcome back, brothers, to Lore. Tonight's story, we're diving into the lore when Leman Russ nearly slew the War Master during the Heresy. As always, before we get to madness, be sure to like and comment any videos or topics you want to see in the future. Be sure to subscribe for the Emperor. I want to thank you guys for the support. I've been killing it. Now, let's get into the madness.
The talon of Horus held Leman Russ above a floor, made slick with the blood of his sons. Its powered claws had passed through the armor of a Lavagar, through the blackened plates and the woven fibers beneath, through the layered muscle wrapped around the Wolf King's ribs. The blades had opened him from hip to breastbone. One lung had collapsed. A secondary heart hammered against torn tissue, forcing blood through wounds too vast to close. Each beat spilled another steaming sheet across Horus Lupercal's gauntlet. The talon's disruption field boiled what it touched. Russ's blood hissed inside his body. Veins burst beneath his skin. Strands of cooked muscle peeled from his shattered ribs and clung to the claws impaling him. The stink was hideous, even through the chemical filters of his helm. Burned iron, opened bowels, scorched ceramite, and the bitter sweetness of transhuman flesh cooked alive. His boots hung above the deck. Beneath them lay the rout. They had died in heaps around their father. Grey plate had been split apart by combi bolter fire and crushed beneath the fists of the Justarin. Fenrisian axes remained locked in dead hands. A severed head stared upward through a cracked helm, one pale eye still fixed upon Russ, as though awaiting an order. Another warrior had been torn in half, his entrails stretched across the deck, where advancing boots had trampled them into a red-black paste. Horus regarded the carnage without triumph. The War Master's armor was wet to the knees. Blood ran through the engraved coils of the serpent's scales. Fragments of bone clung to the lightning claws of the talon. Behind him, the chamber burned beneath a sky of ruptured cables and falling sparks, and every shadow moved with shapes that had no right to exist in the material universe. Russ stared into his brother's face. For a heartbeat, he saw the warrior who had once embraced him. Then Horus smiled. Worldbreaker rose in his free hand. The mace's head had already killed so many of Russ's sons that hair and tissue clung between its adamantine flanges. Warp fire crawled over the weapon in veins of bruised violet. The air recoiled from it. The deck plating buckled beneath the pressure of its gathering descent. Russ tried to speak. Blood flooded his mouth and poured through the grill of his helm. Horus drew the mace back. The blow began to fall. Long before that moment, terror was being taught how to die. The imperial palace had ceased to resemble a seat of dominion. It had become a continent-spanning engine of attrition, its towers enclosed within armor, its courts gutted for ammunition stores, its processional roads divided by walls high enough to break the advance of armored battalions. Gun bastions rose where gardens had once stood. Defense lasers tracked the empty heavens. Void shield generators throbbed beneath the mountains, their vibration trembling through stone older than most civilizations. Leman Russ walked through it all with his helm beneath one arm and displeasure carved across his face. Mortal labor battalions filled the avenues below the Delphic walls. They hauled cables thick as the trunks of Fenrisian ironwood, dragged macro shells upon tracked crawlers, and raised prefabricated barricades under the direction of yellow-armored overseers. Dust turned their sweat to grey paste. Blood darkened their gloves. Some had worked until their hands split open around their tools. None were permitted to stop. A gantry failed as Russ passed beneath the shadow of an unfinished battery tower. The support frame groaned once, then folded. Men screamed warnings that arrived too late. Ferrocrete slabs and steel beams plunged into the labor gangs below. Bodies vanished beneath the collapse. One worker was caught at the waist, his legs crushed flat, while his torso remained upright. He clawed at the rubble and shrieked until a descending beam removed his head. Blood sprayed those trying to escape. Another man crawled free with both arms stripped to the bone, white ulni and radii shining through hanging meat. The overseers ordered the survivors back to work before the dust had settled. Russ watched them obey.
fortification, he said. Bjorn walked at his Primarch's right hand, silent within his battered plate. Burial, Russ corrected. Ahead, Rogel Dawn waited beneath the unfinished arch of a gatehouse. The Praetorian wore gold armor dulled by dust, without ornament beyond the
clenched fist upon his shoulder. One of the servitors spasmed as Russ approached. Its load-bearing limbs had been extended beyond tolerance. Metal joints tore free from wet sockets. The machine slave collapsed, dragging a projector down with it. Bone jutted from the meat around its pelvis. It made no sound beyond a mechanical warning tone. Dawn did not look at it. "You requested counsel," Russ said. "I requested that you remain." "That is not counsel. No, it is strategy." Dawn dismissed the attending officers with a glance. Bjorn remained. The Praetorian's eyes rested on him for a moment before returning to Russ. "The enemy has not yet entered the Segmentum Solar," Dawn said. "The palace defenses remain incomplete. Every legionary removed from Terra diminishes a finite reserve. Your sons cannot be replaced before Horus reaches us. My sons were not bred to stand behind walls. They were bred to obey." Russ bared his teeth. "You believe I have forgotten that? I believe you have chosen to interpret obedience according to your desire." No anger entered Dawn's voice. That made the accusation heavier. He spoke as he measured ranges and calculated ammunition expenditure, without malice and without uncertainty. Russ stepped closer. He was broader than Dawn, wrapped in pelts and knotwork, his unbound hair threaded with bone charms. To the palace officers who watched from distant galleries, he appeared the savage king of every warning whispered about the 6th Legion. Bjorn saw the performance take shape, the loose stance, the mocking curl of the lip, the hand resting near the haft of the axe at Russ's belt. He also saw his Primarch's eyes move across Dawn's hololithic display. Russ absorbed fleet strengths, reserve dispositions, orbital approach vectors, and reinforcement estimates while pretending not to care. His gaze lingered for less than a breath upon each column, yet Bjorn knew he would remember every figure. "The walls may preserve the Imperium for a day," Russ said. "Horus's death may preserve it forever. Or your attack may spend the 6th Legion without changing the course of the war. It will change him. You cannot know that." Russ's smile vanished. "I know my brother. You knew him." The words settled between them. Beyond the archway, cranes lifted another gun emplacement into position. Chains screamed beneath the weight. Mortal crews swarmed across the structure, like insects building their own execution ground. Dawn gestured toward the palace. "This is not surrendering the initiative. It is forcing Horus to strike where we are strongest. He must cross the void, defeat the solar fleets, breach the orbital plates, break the Aegis, and spend his legions against prepared ground." "He will do all of that," Russ said. "Yes. And while he does, worlds burn behind him, armies kneel, forge systems arm his rebellion. Every day he lives, he grows stronger. Every day he advances, he extends his supply lines and narrows his choices." Russ gave a low laugh. "You would make a cage of the whole segmentum and call the prey trapped. I would make the cost of reaching Terra greater than Horus can pay. He has already paid in other men's blood." Dawn's face hardened by the smallest degree. "As will you." Russ did not deny it. That silence followed Bjorn long after they left the gatehouse. Sanguinius found them upon a high causeway overlooking the Lion's Gate spaceport. His white wings were folded close, shielding them from the dust-laden wind. The angel appeared untouched by the labor and misery below, but his eyes carried an exhaustion that no armor could conceal. "You are leaving," he said. Russ leaned against the parapet. Dawn has spread the tidings quickly. I saw it before he spoke. Bjorn watched his Primarch's amusement die. Sanguinius looked beyond them, toward the poisoned horizon. Transport landers rose through the cloud cover in endless columns. Their drives painted the smog with dirty orange light. "There is death around you, Leman." There is death around all of us. Not like this. Russ turned his head. Then tell me what you see. Sanguinius was silent. The wind pulled at his hair. Far below, warning sirens began to howl as another section of the port was sealed for defensive reconstruction. You ask me to make a prison of uncertainty, Russ said. Speak plainly, or do not use shadows to bar my road. I see your sons following you into darkness. I see a blade where no blade should reach. I see grief enough to break a legion. Do you see Horus dead? No. Do you see him living? The angel's expression tightened. Russ nodded. Then your sight is no chain upon me. It is not prophecy alone that concerns me. You speak of oath and necessity as though they are the same. They often are. Not always. You think I hunt him for pride. I think you hunt him because he once made a weapon of you. Russ pushed away from the parapet. For an instant, the causeway seemed too narrow to contain him. Bjorn felt the old pressure gather around his Primarch, the animal threat that preceded violence. Sanguinius did not move. Then Russ exhaled. There are debts that should not be left for sons to inherit, he said. Sanguinius looked at Bjorn, and the meaning was clear. Russ had already accepted that his legion would inherit this one in blood. The Khan waited inside the Hall of Victories, where statues had been covered in blast cloth, and triumphal banners taken down before sparks from the construction works could burn them. Jagatai stood alone beside the empty plinth of a forgotten general, one hand resting upon the hilt of his dao. You have spoken with the architect and the prophet, the Khan said. Now the savage comes to hear from the barbarian. Russ snorted. Which of us is which? That depends upon who is watching. They walked between veiled statues, while Bjorn kept several paces behind. I understand the desire to strike beyond the walls, Jagatai said. A defense without movement becomes a tomb. Dawn knows this, though he hates admitting it. Then you approve. I did not say that. You rarely say anything without leaving yourself 3 roads of escape. The Khan smiled. And you make one road, fill it with corpses, and call the direction fate. Russ stopped. Jagatai faced him. Whom do you serve by this? The Emperor? The Imperium? Or the wounded pride of the king who let Horus point him at Prospero? Bjorn's hand tightened around his weapon. Russ moved so quickly that his pelt snapped in the air. He came within a hand's breadth of the Khan, one fist clenched, teeth exposed. Jagatai remained still. Say it again, Russ whispered. You heard me. The moment stretched. Russ could have struck him. Bjorn knew it. The Primarch wanted to. Every line of his body promised violence. Instead, Russ opened his fist. Horus used me, he said. That truth does not shame me as much as pretending otherwise would. I will not be used twice. For the Emperor, then? For all of it. For none of it. The difference has become a luxury. The Khan studied him, and something like sorrow entered his face. Then ride well, brother. Russ turned away. I do not ride. No, Jagatai said behind him. You fall upon things. Constantine Valdor returned the spear without ceremony. The Captain General stood within a sealed armory chamber beneath the palace, surrounded by custodians in silent gold. The weapon rested upon a black stasis cradle. Its haft was longer than a mortal man was tall, its blade pale and flawless, every surface fashioned with a precision that seemed hostile to the eye. Russ halted at the threshold. No, he said. Valdor regarded him without expression. It is yours. I discarded it. You have discarded it before. It should learn. It has. Russ approached the cradle, as though nearing a sleeping predator. The spear's presence raised the hair along Bjorn's arms beneath his armor. Runes etched into his warplate flickered in response. Valdor noticed. Your priests have smothered you in superstition. My priests have kept your golden hides from being gnawed by things you refuse to name. The Emperor named them sufficiently. The All-Father names many things according to what he requires men to believe. Several custodians shifted their weight. Valdor did not. "Take the weapon, Leman." Russ placed his hand around the haft. Pain crossed his face so quickly that only Bjorn seemed to see it. The spear knew him. That was why he hated it. Axes were honest. A blade entered flesh, broke bone, and spilled life. This thing carried purpose within it. It had been fashioned by the Emperor for a task Russ had never been permitted to understand. He lifted it from the cradle. The chamber lights dimmed. "You mistrust the gift," Valdor said. "I mistrust gifts from fathers who forge their sons for war. And yet you go to fight his war." Russ rested the spear across one shoulder. "No, I go to end my brother's." The mustering decks of the Hrafnkel rang with preparation. Armorers tested bolt mechanisms and replaced worn chain teeth. Servitors loaded combi weapons, plasma guns, and melter charges into gravitic racks. Frost blades were laid upon ritual cloths, while iron priests examined their disruption fields. Breaching shields stood in rows beside boarding torpedoes. Gunships waited with their ramps open, their hulls scarred from wars fought before Horus had betrayed his oaths. Apothecaries counted empty gene seed receptacles. There were thousands. Bjorn passed packs gathered around weapon benches. Some boasted, some drank, some carved death marks into their armor. Others sat in silence, while thralls secured the last plates around their bodies. No one spoke of returning. Russ summoned his Jarls beneath the Hrafnkel's command dais. Hololithic stars burned above them. Terra hung at the center, surrounded by fleet markers and orbital bastions. The Wolf King carried the spear upright. "Horus is no longer only our brother," he said. "What he found beyond the veil has made him more than flesh and pride. Bolters may not end him. Blades may not reach what wears his face." The Jarls listened without movement. "We may strike and fail. We may wound him and die before knowing whether the wound mattered. The rout may be broken so completely that no Skjald remains to speak of us." Bjorn studied his father's face. There was love there, fierce and terrible. Russ loved his sons enough to tell them the truth. He was cruel enough to spend them despite it. "Any warrior who remains upon Terra will bear no shame," Russ said. "Any Jarl who refuses this road may depart with his oath unbroken." No one moved. Russ closed his eyes for one heartbeat. When he opened them, the Primarch was gone behind the king. Malkador's message reached the bridge as the last assault craft was secured. It came through channels warded by sigil, gene lock, and psychic cipher. A hidden mark still pulsed aboard the vengeful spirit, planted during the Knights Errant operation at Molech. Weak, distant, and half drowned by the warp, it nevertheless endured. Horus could be followed. Beyond the armor glass, Terra filled the void, vast and wounded, girdled by shipyards and weapon platforms. The cradle of humanity looked less like a world than a fortress awaiting execution. Russ stood before the viewing port with one hand upon the spear. Bjorn took his place behind him. Across the fleet, drives awakened. The Hrafnkel trembled as power flooded its ancient heart. Docking clamps released. Warning lumens bathed the bridge in blood-red light. Russ watched Terra begin to fall away. "Open the void," he said. "My brother has run long enough." Fenris received its sons beneath a sky at war with itself. Storm fronts rolled over the upper atmosphere in black continents, split apart by spears of white lightning. The clouds were so dense that the fleet entered them before the world became visible, descending through vapor-bruised purple by electrical fire. Thunder struck the hulls hard enough to stir dust from ancient bulkheads. Void shields flickered around the warships, turning rain to steam before it could touch their armor. Below, the seas were black. Ice fields crawled across them like living things, breaking and reforming under the violence of the tides. Between the flows, shapes moved beneath the water. Some were broad enough to be islands. Others followed the shadow of the fleet, pale backs briefly visible in the lightning before they vanished into the depths. The Hrafnkel came down through the storm with its wounds exposed. Armor had been stripped from whole sections of the Gloriana's flank. Work lights burned around open gun decks where servitors and thralls crawled among ruptured conduits. Dark scars marked the places where enemy lances had bitten through plate. The ship had survived wars enough to kill lesser vessels 100 times over, yet it approached. The Fang like a warrior returning to the hearth only long enough to sharpen his blade. No victory signals welcomed it. No horns sounded from the mountain. The Fang rose out of the storm, its towers black against the snow, its landing bastions cut directly into the stone. Fires burned behind armored apertures. Defense batteries followed the fleet across the sky. The fortress recognized its sons, but Fenris had never mistaken survival for triumph. Leman Russ stood upon the command deck with the spear of Russ resting beside him. He had not touched it since leaving Terra. Bjorn watched his Primarch stare down at the world. Russ wore the armor of a Lavagar beneath a cloak of grey fur, though he had removed his helm. His hair hung loose around his face. Lightning flashed across his features and made him appear carved from old bone. "The Jarls are assembled," Bjorn said. "They can remain assembled. The Fang expects you. The Fang knows where I am." Russ turned from the viewing port before the Hrafnkel had completed its descent. He did not visit the hearth halls. He did not sit beneath the standards of the Legion or hear the reports of the priests who had remained behind. He left the landing vaults by the lowest gates, taking only Bjorn, Kvar, and 8 of the oldest Gothi with him. They traveled south into the Krakgard, while the storm followed overhead. The land became harsher with every league. Forests thinned into fields of iron grey stone. Mountains rose through the clouds like the broken teeth of a dead god, their slopes stripped bare by wind and volcanic heat. Rivers of meltwater ran beneath crusts of black ice. Fumaroles hissed from cracks in the earth, releasing vapor that stank of sulfur and old blood. Kvar led them. The rune priest was wrapped in a storm-grey cloak over his armor. Runes covered his plate, each mark cut into ceramite and filled with powdered bone. Bronze charms hung from his staff and clicked softly whenever the ground trembled. "This is not the witchcraft of Prospero," Kvar said. Russ walked beside him, carrying the spear across one shoulder. "You all say that, because it is true. You reach into the other sea. They reached into the other sea. The sea did not ask which words you used before it swallowed men." Kvar's expression remained grave. "The sons of Magnus believed knowledge made them masters. We know that knowledge only tells us which shores are least likely to devour us. Then this is cowardice made ceremonial. This is survival made humble." Bjorn saw the smile pull briefly at Russ's mouth. Kvar continued before his Primarch could mock him again. "What waits beyond Sirta's door is not a place as mortals understand place. Fenris gives shape to powers that have none. We speak of halls, kings, beasts and trials, because the human mind must clothe the warp in something it can endure." Russ looked toward the mountains. A story, a language, a lie that leads to truth. Kvar glanced at the spear. "Perhaps that is why the weapon brought you here." The trail ended where the earth had split apart. A chasm descended between walls of volcanic stone. Red light pulsed far below, not from an open flow of magma, but from cracks running through the rock like veins beneath skin. The air tasted metallic. Every breath carried heat, yet frost clung to the edges of the path. They descended in silence. Sirta's door waited beneath the mountain. It was not a door fashioned by hands. 2 pillars of black stone leaned toward one another across a fissure, joined by a natural bridge scarred with runes older than the coming of the Imperium. Beyond them lay a cavern, whose far wall could not be seen. Darkness gathered there with unnatural density, swallowing the light of the Gothi's torches. Bjorn's armor registered no temperature within that darkness. His eyes saw movement. Something passed across the opening, tall enough to brush the roof of the cavern. It made no sound, yet the runes upon his plate began to ache against his skin. Kavar planted the butt of his staff into the rock. "You will enter alone," he said. Russ looked at Bjorn. "He comes." "No, he comes. He cannot pass the threshold. The path is shaped for you. Then he stands here." Bjorn said nothing. He understood the order for what it was. Russ did not need a scholar. He needed a witness who would not abandon his post when the mountain began to scream. The 8 Gothi took their places around the opening. They formed a wide circle, each facing outward, staffs grounded, heads bowed. Kavar stood at the center, directly before Sirtir's door. "What happens to them?" Bjorn asked. Kavar did not look at him. "What must?" Russ's eyes narrowed. "They know the price," Kavar said. "As do you." The Wolf King lowered the spear from his shoulder. The blade reflected no light. It seemed instead to contain a pale radiance of its own, cold and precise, unlike the red glow beneath the mountain. Kavar began to chant. The sound did not remain in the cavern. It traveled downward through the rock and returned from impossible distances. The other Gothi joined him, their voices layering over one another until the words lost all human rhythm. Frost spread across the stone. It formed first around the staffs, then ran outward in branching lines. The volcanic floor cracked beneath it. Steam rose where ice crossed vents of molten heat. Russ stepped toward the threshold. The darkness opened. For an instant, Bjorn saw beyond it. He saw a hall of antlers beneath a sky without stars. He saw men hanging from rafters by their own entrails. He saw a white wolf sleeping upon a mountain of bones. Then the darkness closed around Russ. The spear vanished last. Bjorn tried to move. His armor locked. Every joint seized at once, not through mechanical failure, but through a force pressing against his flesh from within. His arms remained at his sides. His lungs labored. Even his eyes resisted turning. Behind him, something began to scrape its claws along the cavern wall. Russ emerged beneath a roof built from the ribs of giants. The hall stretched farther than sight. Pillars of ice held up darkness. Fires burned in pits between long tables, yet they gave no warmth. Around them sat warriors in rusted mail and broken plate. Some wore the faces of Fenrisian kings, whose names had survived only in fragments of saga. Others had no faces at all, only skulls sealed beneath masks of frozen skin. At the hall's end waited the Earl King. He was old, not old as mortals measured age, but old in the manner of mountains worn down by storms and oceans retreating from dead shores. His beard lay across his knees in coils. One eye was blind, the other bright as a winter moon. Beside him rested a drinking vessel broad enough to drown an army. Russ approached without bowing. "You are poorly mannered," said the Earl King. "You are dead. So are many kings. I am not." The Earl King smiled. "You came to learn whether that can change." He gestured toward the vessel. "Drink." Russ lifted it. The bowl was heavy enough to crack the table beneath it, yet he raised it to his lips and drank. The liquid was colder than any Fenrisian sea. It carried salt, blood, ash, and the bitterness of endings. He drank until his throat tore. He drank until the pressure split vessels in his eyes and blood ran down his cheeks. The vessel remained full. Russ cast it down. It struck the floor hard enough to break stone, but not a single drop spilled. The dead laughed. The Earl King raised one finger. An old man stepped from behind the throne. He was thin, bent, and naked, except for a strip of hide around his waist. His skin hung loose from wasted muscle. He carried no weapon. "Wrestle him," said the Earl King. Russ caught the old man by the shoulders and drove him backward. The old man did not move. Russ increased the pressure. His boots cracked the floor. Servos growled inside the armor of a Lavagar. The old man's feet remained planted. He smiled with toothless gums. Then he took Russ by the wrist. Pain exploded through the Primarch's arm. His bones groaned. The old man turned, and Russ was hurled across the hall. He struck a pillar of ice and shattered it in a storm of fragments. The dead laughed louder. Russ rose with murder in his eyes. A wolf lay before the throne. It was neither large nor fierce. Its fur was white around the muzzle. One ear had been torn away. Its chest rose slowly as it slept. "Move it," said the Earl King. Russ seized the animal beneath its body. The wolf did not wake. He pulled. The floor split under his boots. Veins stood out across his neck. The servos in his armor screamed and failed. The wolf remained exactly where it was. Russ snarled and lifted until blood burst from beneath. His fingernails. Nothing. The laughter became a roar. The dead rose from the tables. They came with axes eaten by rust, with broken spears, with claws grown through the ends of their fingers. Drowned kings opened mouths full of black water. Wolfen shades crawled across the rafters, their limbs twisted, their jaws hanging too wide. Russ welcomed them. His fist crushed the first skull into the corpse's chest. He tore another warrior's jaw away and drove the broken bone through its eye. The spear moved in bright arcs, splitting mail, ribs, and frozen flesh. Dead men burst beneath its blade, spilling seawater, worms, and clotted blood across the hall. A wolfen leapt from above. Russ caught it by the throat and smashed it against a pillar until its spine came out through its back. Still they came. He killed them by the score. They rose where they fell. Skulls reformed. Severed limbs crawled back to their bodies. Torn bellies closed around hanging entrails. The hall filled with fragments of the dead, and every fragment moved. Russ fought until the floor disappeared beneath butchered flesh. The Earl King watched. At last Russ stopped. The dead gathered around him, waiting. He looked at the drinking vessel. "The seas," he said. "No, more than seas." The Earl King said nothing. The year turns, ice melts, rivers run, rain falls, all waters leave and return. No mouth can empty the seasons. He looked toward the old man. "Age?" The old man bowed. Russ turned to the sleeping wolf. "Death." The wolf opened one pale eye. "No king moves death from his hall," Russ said. "He only waits until it wakes." The laughter ceased. The hall tore open, not shattered, opened. The pillars, roof, and dead peeled apart like painted cloth pulled from reality. Beyond them stood another Leman Russ. He wore no pelts. His armor was gold and pearl, shaped with the clean lines of terror rather than the rough ornament of Fenris. His hair was bound. His face was shaven. There were no bone charms, no trophies, and no fangs displayed in threat. He looked like a prince, fashioned for an empire that had never needed monsters. Russ regarded him with disgust. "You are ugly," said the other Russ. "You are unblooded. I am what remained possible before Fenris taught you to hide." "I hide nothing." The other Russ smiled. That smile was Russ's own, stripped of savagery. "You hide behind every growl, every boast, every pelt. You made a weapon of the barbarian because it was easier than admitting you understood what you were asked to do." Russ raised the spear. The other Russ already held it. "The weapon does not reveal lies," he said. "It reveals that which lies beneath them." "What is it?" "A fragment of our father's purpose, his truth given edge." Russ felt anger rise, quick and familiar. The other Russ stepped closer. "It does not merely open flesh. It opens certainty. Whoever it pierces will see something fundamental within himself." "Horus." "Yes." "And me?" "Yes." Russ understood then why he had hated the spear from the first moment it entered his hand. An axe asked only whether its wielder was strong enough to kill. This weapon asked whether he could endure understanding the thing he killed. The other Russ thrust. The spear passed through the armor of Elavagar as though the plate was skin. Its blade split Russ's breastbone. It entered one heart and burst through the rear of his armor in a fountain of blood. The shock drove him to his knees. He did not die. He saw. Not words, not answers. He saw a light beneath a laboratory floor, too vast to have entered the world through any door. He saw hands shaping flesh around storms. He saw infants sleeping beneath glass, while shadows crowded close, each shadow wearing a crown, a muzzle, wings, horns, or a face that had not yet learned hatred. He saw the Emperor standing at the center of a design built from stolen fire. He saw bargains without mouths, chains without metal, 20 vessels cast into darkness, each carrying something that was not born and could never be wholly human. Russ screamed. Outside Surtur's door, the first Gothi died. His spine arched until it broke through the skin of his back. Bone punched outward between armor plates. His mouth opened, but the sound that emerged belonged to something older and deeper than a man. Blood ran from his eyes in black ropes. The second Gothi's skull collapsed inward. The third began to convulse. His teeth shattered against one another. He bit through his tongue and drowned in blood while remaining upright within the circle. Bjorn could not move. Claws scraped closer behind him. The fourth Gothi burst at the abdomen. Intestines struck the cavern floor in steaming loops. His body remained standing for several breaths, hands locked around his staff, before folding over its own opened pelvis. Kavar's chant continued. The fifth died without a wound. His armor simply crumpled around him, compressing flesh and bone until red slurry poured from the joints. The sixth tore out his own throat. The seventh turned his face toward Bjorn. There was no face left, only a wet cavity filled with teeth. He fell. Kavar stood alone. The rune priest's voice had become a rasp. Blood covered his beard. One eye had ruptured and hung against his cheek by a cord of tissue. "Hold," he commanded. Bjorn did not know whether Kavar spoke to him, the doorway, or the thing circling them. The unseen creature breathed against the back of Bjorn's neck. His armor alarms shrieked. Kavar drove his staff into the ground. The runes along its length flared white. Something struck him from the darkness. His chest opened from shoulder to hip. Ribs snapped outward. One lung slapped wetly against his armor as he fell, yet his hand remained around the staff. The binding broke. Bjorn turned. The creature came from the cavern wall, as though birthed by stone. It was long-limbed and skinless, its muscles black with oil. Horns curled from a head made of too many jaws. Human hands reached from its belly, grasping an opening. Bjorn raised his blade. Surtur's door erupted. Russ strode through with blood pouring from the wound in his chest. He hurled the spear. The weapon crossed the cavern in a line of white fire. It entered the demon's central mouth and passed through the length of its body. For a heartbeat, the creature became transparent. Bjorn saw men, beasts, and screaming faces trapped within it. Then it detonated. Burning black matter struck the walls. Chunks of muscle writhed where they landed. Warp lightning crawled over the floor, igniting the remains of the dead Gothi in cold blue flame. Kavar was still alive. Russ knelt beside him. The rune priest looked up through his remaining eye. "Did you find your answer?" "No." Kavar's ruined mouth formed something close to a smile. Then it was a true journey. His hand released the staff. Russ remained beside him until the last breath left his body. Surtur's door groaned behind them. Shapes moved within the darkness, drawn toward the wound in reality. "Seal it," Russ said. Bjorn looked at the dead. "With what?" "The mountain." They brought the cavern down. Melter charges opened the supporting walls. Rune-cut pillars cracked. Thousands of tons of volcanic stone crashed into the fissure, burying the threshold, the corpses, and whatever waited beyond. Fire burst through the rubble and died beneath falling ice. Russ emerged into the storm, with dried blood covering his armor. The Jarls waited for him upon the black slopes of the Krakgard. Behind them, gunships crouched in the snow, engines whining against the wind. Russ stood before his sons. "The road ends in death," he said. "Perhaps mine, perhaps all of ours. Horus may break the route and cast what remains into the void." No warrior spoke. "Any Jarl may remain. Any pack may return to the Fang. There will be no shame in it, no oath broken, No name struck from the sagas. The storm moved around them. None stepped away. Russ looked across their faces. He did not laugh. He did not bare his teeth or raise the spear in triumph. For the first time, Bjorn saw the loyalty of the Legion weigh upon him like a chain. A signal rune pulsed across the display inside Bjorn's helm. The mark hidden aboard the vengeful spirit had resolved from the warp. The Warmaster's flagship was moving toward a trinary system beyond the greater roads to Beta Garman. Russ saw the same message. "Trisolian," Bjorn said. The Wolf King looked toward the storm-hidden stars. "Then we hunt." Trisolian was an act of industrial blasphemy committed against the void. 3 stars burned within its borders. Trisolian A dominated the system, a blue-white furnace whose radiance bleached color from armor and turned unshielded flesh cancerous within minutes. Farther out, 2 red dwarfs circled through their ancient dance, flooding navigation channels with electromagnetic distortion and dragging at the system's shipping lanes with overlapping tides of gravity. Between them, the Mechanicum had built its kingdom. Orbital manufactoria encircled hollowed moons. Refinery chains stretched for thousands of kilometers, drawing metals from captive asteroids and feeding them into forge stations whose exhaust plumes could be seen from the outer system. Processing cities clung to airless rocks beneath domes of layered armor glass. Freight engines moved between stations in endless processions, each vessel hauling ammunition, armor plate, reactor cores or nutrient mass toward the greater war raging near Beta Garman. Trisolian held no ancient prestige. Its priesthood possessed no seat among the most honored synods of Mars. Its name inspired no pilgrimages. Its value lay in function. Fleets could be repaired there. Armies could be provisioned. Weapons could be forged, blessed, catalogued, and sent onward toward slaughter. That was why the Warmaster had come. Beneath the surface of Trisolian A4, Belisarius Karl watched a man become red mist. The worker had been running between 2 nutrient reservoirs when the bolt struck him between the shoulders. The mass-reactive shell entered intact, bored through ribs, and detonated inside his chest. His torso expanded for a fraction of a second before bursting apart. Arms, head, and fragments of spine struck the surrounding grain in separate directions. The legs continued for 3 stumbling steps. Then they folded into the irrigation channel. Karl did not pause. He moved through waist-high crops beneath a sky of artificial suns. The cavern roof lay kilometers above, hidden behind hydroponic haze and smoke. Luminaries hung from suspension trusses in ordered constellations, their pale light flickering whenever the Night Lords sabotaged another power nexus. The agrifields had once fed millions. Now the grain burned. Flames moved through the crops in long orange walls. Nutrient paste overflowed from ruptured vats, pouring into the channels as a grey, viscous flood. Where incendiary rounds touched it, the compound ignited with chemical fury, carrying fire through the irrigation network until entire fields became glowing grids. Karl's respirator sealed against the smoke. His optical feeds recorded every death. Data remained useful, even when the flesh producing it did not. 3 Thalaxi advanced ahead of him, their armored forms half obscured by burning grain. Lightning guns discharged in staggered sequence. Phased energy struck a corrupted Skitarius at the edge of the next field, passing through armor before erupting within the body. The soldier's limbs snapped outward. Cooked organs sprayed from the joints of its plate. Return fire scythed through the crops. A bolt struck one of the Thalaxi beneath the arm. The shell punched through the flexible seal and detonated against the machine warrior's internal systems. Flesh, cabling, and amniotic fluid burst from the wound. The Thalax staggered, but did not fall. Its organic remnants had long ago surrendered the privilege of pain. A shape dropped from the ventilation gantries. Midnight blue armor flashed through smoke. The Night Lord landed upon the wounded Thalax and drove a chain blade through the crown of its helm. Rotating teeth tore into armor, then bone, then the nutrient-suspended brain beneath. Black fluid and pink tissue sprayed across the traitor's breastplate. Cole fired. His Volkite weapon struck the legionary across the ribs. Heat bloomed inside the ceramite. The Night Lord twisted, armor glowing, and turned his skull-faced helm toward Cole. The second shot ignited him from within. The legionary's flesh combusted beneath his plate. Fire burst from his grill and eye lenses. He took 2 steps toward Cole before the trapped heat ruptured his abdomen and hurled strips of burning intestine through the armor seals. Cole recorded the sequence. The Volkite discharge had required a longer exposure than predicted. Adjustment would be necessary. A scream rolled across the aggrefields. It came from the announcement system. The sound began as a human cry and lengthened into something raw. Loudspeakers built to broadcast work rotations now carried the wet sawing of blades through meat. A man begged, the Omnissiah, for deliverance. His voice broke into bubbling gasps as his lungs filled. Then another voice replaced his, then another. The Night Lords had looped the executions. Cowl's noospheric display filled with agitation markers as mortal workers heard the screams. Heart rates climbed. Formation discipline decayed. Labor units abandoned assigned shelters and crowded into access tunnels, where they obstructed ammunition servitors and retreating cohorts. Terror was functioning exactly as the 8th Legion intended. Cowl opened the Loyalist command lattice. He stripped the screaming from every channel under his authority. The audio remained in the physical world, echoing through kilometers of cavern, but within the noosphere, it became an excluded variable. Emotional distress indicators were reduced to neutral glyphs. Casualty reports became quantities. Threat warnings lost the recorded voices of dying operators and retained only location, vector, and severity. A junior adept protested. Cowl muted him. Fear was information corrupted by repetition. He advanced through the burning fields while the screams continued overhead. The source hung from a harvesting gantry. 6 Mechanicum adepts had been suspended by their wrists beneath the machinery. Their robes had been removed. Their skin had followed. The flaying had been methodical. Red muscle shone beneath the artificial suns. Cables had been inserted into exposed nerves, carrying each involuntary contraction into the announcement network. One adept remained conscious. His lidless eyes rolled toward Call as the harvesting blades above him rotated. The machine descended. Its teeth entered the adept's abdomen and drew his intestines out in a glistening rope. Cowl directed his weapon toward the gantry controls and fired. The mechanism exploded. The adept dropped into the burning grain and disappeared. Mercy was inefficient. It was also sometimes necessary to prevent the enemy from extracting additional value. A warning glyph flared. Call turned as a Night Lord came through the smoke. The legionary wore trophies of copper wire and finger bones across his breastplate. A chain axe filled one hand. The other held a severed Mechanicum head by its spinal cabling. He threw the head first. Call's targeter followed the distraction for a fraction too long. The chain axe struck his shoulder. Teeth screamed against armor. The blow spun him around and tore through the outer plating of his left arm. Warning runes flooded his vision. The Night Lord kicked him to the ground, then raised the axe for the killing stroke. A beam of white light crossed the field. The Night Lord vanished from the waist upward. His legs remained standing. The edges of the severed torso glowed. Armor and flesh converted into expanding plasma. A fraction later, the lower body collapsed, spilling cooked organs into the grain. Theodulus Palisar came through the smoke with his Myrmidon destructors. They did not advance like soldiers. They moved like mobile altars, dedicated to the destruction of matter. Their bodies had been rebuilt around weapon systems too large for ordinary infantry. Heavy power cabling ran from their backs into reactor housings. Sensor arrays replaced heads. Arms ended in plasma fusils, Volkite engines, and radiation projectors. One carried a conversion beamer whose barrel pulsed with caged light. Corrupted Skitarii opened fire from a line of irrigation machinery. Palisar answered in Binharic.
The burst lasted less than a heartbeat. It contained target hierarchy, firing sequence, devotional acknowledgement, and a contemptuous assessment of the enemy's tactical simplicity. The myrmidons fired. Plasma crossed the fields in shrieking blue streams. The first corrupted Skitarius was struck in the chest. Armor liquefied. The body inside expanded into steam and fragments, bursting from the plate in ribbons of cooked muscle. A Volkite beam swept across three more. Their bodies ignited almost simultaneously. One tore off its own helm as the heat consumed its face, revealing eyes bursting in their sockets and teeth blackening within a mouth full of flame. Palisar's irradiation engine discharged. The air shimmered. Night Lords emerging from the ventilation shafts stumbled as invisible energy passed through their armor. One legionary's flesh swelled inside his plate, tumors erupting across organs and muscle in seconds. His abdomen split. A mass
of steaming tissue forced its way through the breach and slapped onto the ground, still connected to him by pulsing cords. Another fired his bolter until his fingers fused around the trigger. The weapon continued discharging after he fell. Cowell pushed himself upright. His damaged arm hung at an incorrect angle. Internal diagnostics predicted progressive actuator failure. Palisar looked at him. "You retain repair capability," the Myrmidon Lord said. His voice emerged through several speakers at once, each producing a different tonal range. Cowell examined the nearest destructor. A Night Lord's bolt had torn through its spinal power couplings. Coolant leaked from the wound in silver droplets. "You intervened to preserve a mechanic," Call said. "I intervened to preserve a function. You could repair the damage yourself. Suboptimal use of my destructive resources." Cowell transmitted a burst of Binharic irritation. Palisar answered with a compressed sequence of disdain so dense that Cowell's processors required several seconds to unpack it fully. Among its meanings were the assertions that knowledge existed to serve force, preservation without purpose was cowardice, and Cole possessed the theological instincts of an inventory servitor. Cole knelt beside the damaged Myrmidon. "Destruction without preservation leaves nothing to destroy tomorrow." Palisar's conversion beamer charged with a deep harmonic whine. "Then tomorrow is permitted to justify itself." The beam fired. It struck a Night Lord at the far end of the field. At that distance, the weapon reached greater potency. The legionary disappeared inside a sphere of blue-white energy. Armor, bone, and gene-forged flesh were converted into incandescent particles. The blast expanded through the traitors behind him, ripping 6 corrupted Skitari apart and throwing their shadows against the cavern wall. Cowell completed the repair. The damaged Myrmidon rose without gratitude. Palisar turned toward the next battlefield. They were winning. Hester Aspertia. Sigma Sigma knew this because every local projection confirmed it. She stood within the command sanctum of the Heptaligon, connected to Trisolian through 112 noospheric conduits. Data moved through her faster than speech. The underground agrafields remained contested, but loyalist Thalax cohorts had stabilized the eastern tunnels. Palisar's Myrmidons were eradicating enemy concentrations faster than the Night Lords could reinforce them. Surface defense engines still controlled 3 of the principal transit shafts. Local victory probability had risen above acceptable confidence. It was irrelevant. Aspertia widened her perception. Orbital data unfolded around her. The vengeful spirit dominated the inner system. Its escort fleet held the principal translation corridors, dockyards, and weapons platforms. Trisolian's defense ships were burning wrecks or captive assets. The outer manufactoria had already accepted traitor command codes. Reinforcement was impossible. Evacuation routes were closed. Every hour of continued resistance increased the likelihood that the War Master would order planetary sterilization. She calculated the cost: the destruction of the Heptaligon, the loss of 3,000 years of stored design knowledge, the extinction of Trisolian's senior priesthood, the annihilation of more than 11 billion bonded workers, soldiers, servitors, and dependence across the system. Honor did not alter the numbers. Loyalty did not reduce the dead. She issued the surrender protocol. Call received it while reconnecting his damaged shoulder. For 3 seconds, he assumed the command had been corrupted. Then he saw Aspertia's authority seals. He opened a private channel. "You are terminating a successful defense. I am preserving Trisolian. You are transferring it to the enemy. I am preventing its destruction. The distinction will not survive first contact with the Dark Mechanicum." Aspertia's image appeared in his vision as a figure of robes, brass limbs, and slowly rotating optical clusters. The War Master requires the system intact. He requires its weapons, labor, and knowledge. He does not require those who presently control them. Compliance creates utility. Utility is not protection. Death provides less. Carl transmitted images from captured tunnels, flayed adepts, dismantled servitors, workers nailed to ventilation vanes, corrupted code crawling through loyal cogitators like infection. This is the institution you would preserve. This is the alternative to extinction. No, this is extinction conducted slowly enough that its victims continue producing ammunition. Aspertia's voice remained calm. Loyalty is a principle available only to the living. Then it is no principle at all. For the first time, a pause entered her response. "Stand down, Belisarius Cole." The order spread through the agrifields. A Thalax cohort froze while advancing through burning crops. Their weapons powered down in sequence. One remained with its lightning gun raised toward a wounded Night Lord. The legionary looked at it. Then he laughed. He rose unsteadily, drew a combat blade, and pushed it through the Thalax's damaged faceplate. The point entered the brain housing. He twisted until the machine warrior collapsed. Across the fields, the killings began. Wounded loyalists were shot where they lay. Mortal workers emerged from hiding with hands raised and were cut down by bolter fire. A Night Lord seized an injured Skitarius by the ankle and dragged it into the flames, watching until its ammunition detonated inside its body. Palisar's myrmidons began powering down. One resisted. Its plasma fusel continued to charge, aimed at a squad of corrupted Skitari approaching beneath a white surrender lumen. Palisar caught the weapon arm. Actuators screamed against one another. The Myrmidon transmitted protest in a burst of machine fury. Palisar overrode it by force, wrenching the barrel aside just as the weapon discharged. Plasma struck the cavern roof. Molten stone rained into the fields. The corrupted Skitari opened fire anyway. 2 unarmed Thalaxi were torn apart. Kaul looked toward Palisar. "This is preservation." Palisar's weapon housings pulsed with restrained energy. "This is arithmetic." Traitor escorts gathered the priesthood within the heptalagon. They sorted the captives beneath black standards. Senior adepts were separated by discipline and data access. Engine seers were scanned for useful modifications. Lesser priests were examined for viable organs and neural tissue. Those judged redundant were moved toward the processing stations at the edge of the hangar. Carl watched a screaming adept strapped into a surgical frame. Servo arms cut away the back of the skull. Clamps entered the opening and spread the bone apart. The adept remained conscious as extraction needles pierced the brain. His scream became a wet gargle when a mechadendrite severed the speech centers. The brain came free, trailing nerves and blood. It was lowered into a crude cogitator cradle. A green lumen illuminated. The machine began processing inventory requests. Aspertia stood nearby. She did not look at Kaul. The main blast doors opened. Sotanul entered first. Her body had passed beyond imitation of the human form. Black metal limbs carried a torso enclosed within rotating plates. Cables spread behind her like the roots of a diseased tree. Her face was a cluster of lenses surrounding a narrow strip of preserved flesh. Binharic authority erupted from her. Every machine in the hangar responded. Some knelt. Others began transmitting devotional code without command. Servo skulls struck the floor, and cracked their casings open. Cogitators generated prayers in languages absent from their archives. Then Horus Lupercal entered the heptalagon. The serpent's scales covered him in darkness, edged with gold. Worldbreaker rested in one hand. The talon enclosed the other, its claws stained by old murder. Sons of Horus marched behind him in sea-green plate, their weapons held across their chests. Cowl's sensors failed. They reported a Primarch. They reported a furnace. They reported a void containing 4 vast intelligences that turned their attention toward every living mind in the chamber. Horus smiled upon the conquered priesthood. Around him, machines that had never known fear began to pray. Horus Lupercal looked upon the conquered priesthood of Trisolian and spoke to them as though they were honored guests. The heptalagon's main hangar had become a court of submission. Thousands of adepts, engine seers, magi and data thralls stood beneath the vaulted superstructure, surrounded by sons of Horus in sea green, plate, and the black-armored automata of the dark mechanicum. Chains of sensors swung from maintenance gantries. Their fumes mingled with engine oil, cauterized flesh, and the copper reek rising from the execution channels cut into the floor. Worldbreaker rested against the Warmaster's shoulder. The talon hung at his side. Neither weapon needed to be raised. "You have been told that I came as a conqueror," Horus said. His voice carried without amplification. It reached the most distant gantries as clearly as it reached the priests kneeling before him. "That is the first of many lies you must now abandon." Belisarius Cawl watched from among the lower ranks. His damaged shoulder had been locked into a temporary brace. Warning runes drifted through his sight, informing him of actuator stress, internal fluid loss, and growing contamination in 3 secondary systems. He dismissed them. Horus demanded all available attention. The Warmaster appeared unchanged whenever Cawl trusted only his optical organs. He was a Primarch in black plate, edged with burnished gold, broad enough to make the legionaries behind him seem diminished. His face possessed the beauty expected of the Emperor's greatest son. Noble lines, shaven head, eyes alive with understanding. The Auspex disagreed. One sensor recorded a body temperature below freezing. Another measured furnace heat sufficient to soften ceramite. A third returned no biological signature at all. Mass detectors claimed Horus weighed as much as a battle tank. Gravitic monitors insisted he was hollow. Radiation sensors found energies associated with active plasma containment, while noospheric analysis identified devotional harmonics within the sound of his breathing. Cawl recalibrated. The results multiplied. For a moment, Horus appeared young enough to have only recently left Chthoniya. Then the Warmaster's face sagged into impossible age, skin tightening over a skull carved by millennia of hatred. A wound opened across his throat. It vanished. His armor cracked. His armor became whole. His silhouette expanded until it seemed to fill the entire hangar, blotting out gantries, gunships, and the vast blast doors behind him. Cawl shut down half his senses. Horus smiled as though he had noticed. "The Emperor did not raise Mars as an ally," the Warmaster continued. "He bound it. He concealed the chain beneath treaties, titles, and promises of shared dominion, but a chain does not become sacred because it is gilded." Several priests shifted. Horus's gaze passed over them, lingering on each face for only an instant. Cawl saw the effect. A magos of metallurgy bowed lower. An explorator clutched his mechadendrites close. A data archivist began transmitting private queries to sealed memory vaults. The Warmaster spoke to the assembly, yet every listener believed the words had been shaped for him alone. How much knowledge did Mars forbid at the Emperor's command? How many vaults were sealed because discovery threatened his authority? How many of you were ordered to preserve ignorance and call it wisdom? A low ripple of Binharic unrest moved through the hangar. Servo skulls began to chant. No order had been issued. Their machine spirits opened devotional channels independently, repeating strings of corrupted praise in metallic voices. Some spoke High Gothic, others used machine tongues absent from Trisolian's archives. One emitted a sequence Call could not translate, though every organic remnant within his body recoiled from hearing it. Biological adepts began to hemorrhage. Blood ran from nostrils, auditory implants, and sealed mouths. One priest dropped to his knees as crimson tears leaked around his augmetic eyes. A second clawed at his cranial casing until metal fingernails tore strips from his own scalp. Horus did not look toward them. "The Mechanicum was promised the stars," he said. "Instead, you were made armorers to an empire that feared your questions. Your labor fed a crusade whose true purpose was never shared with you. Your obedience built a throne upon which one man intended to sit forever." Sotanul stood beside him like an idol raised from a dead forge. Her machine body spread across the platform on multiple articulated limbs. Rotating plates enclosed the fragments of flesh she had retained. Bundles of cable hung from her spine, each one linked to the Heptaligon's command architecture. She transmitted a command burst. Loyalist insignia vanished from the noosphere. Trisolian's defense batteries changed color upon Call's display. Permission keys that had belonged to loyal Magi were deleted. Orbital weapon controls accepted new masters. Cohort identification codes were rewritten until former allies appeared as hostile entities, and traitor engines carried the verification sigils of lawful command. It was conquest performed at the speed of thought. Cal entered the maintenance lattice through a minor ventilation diagnostic. He hid a sequence inside the routine governing lubricant pressure in an agricultural lift. The code did nothing. That was its protection. From there, he embedded fragments into cooling checks, elevator rights, and the self-testing cycles of ammunition conveyors. No single piece contained enough information to reveal his purpose. Joined together, they could restore loyal command pathways across several critical systems, assuming he survived long enough to activate them. Horus opened his arms. "I offer you what was denied. Inquiry without fear, creation without chains, the right to seek understanding wherever it may be found." Caul heard a priest whisper the name of the Omnissiah. Another answered with the title War Master. Horus lowered his hands. "Those who join us will retain rank and function beneath the authority of Magos Sotanul. Your forges will continue. Your archives will be protected. Trisolian will grow greater than it has ever been beneath the false peace of terror." He paused. "And those who cannot accept this are free to declare themselves." No threat entered his voice. "Step forward. You will not be punished for honesty." Caul examined the execution channels. They were already open. The first loyalist moved after 12 seconds. He was an elderly Magos, whose lower body had been replaced by a tracked propulsion unit. His robes bore the cog and lightning emblem of the old Treaty of Olympus. He advanced from the assembly and stopped before the platform. "I remain sworn to the Emperor of Mankind," he said. "The machine god witnesses my oath." Horus inclined his head. "Your courage honors you." The old Magos appeared surprised. Horus looked toward a Sons of Horus officer. The legionary stepped forward and fired once. The bolt struck the Magos above the respirator. The shell penetrated the cranial casing and detonated. Bone, brass, and brain matter burst across the priests behind him. His tracked body remained upright, motors turning uselessly before toppling into the blood channel. A second loyalist came forward, then 3 more. One carried no weapon. One held a ritual axe, but surrendered it before speaking. Another had replaced so much of his body that only a preserved brain remained inside a glass cylinder supported by 6 delicate legs. Horus praised each of them. The unarmed priest was seized by a Justarian warrior. Black gauntlets closed around his torso. The Terminator squeezed until ribs broke through skin, and the body split at the waist, spilling organs across the deck. The axe-bearer was forced to kneel. A power blade took his head. The cut cauterized the neck so quickly that the head retained consciousness for several seconds, eyes moving as it rolled between Horus's boots. The brain cylinder was crushed beneath Worldbreaker. Glass exploded. Preservative fluid spread across the platform. The exposed brain struck the metal with a wet slap before the War Master's boot reduced it to pink paste. Horus continued speaking while the remains were removed. No joy marked his features, no fury. The executions were corrections to an equation. The dead had selected irrelevance, and the War Master expended only the effort required to erase them. That calm frightened Cole more than rage would have. A berserker acknowledged resistance by hating it. Horus scarcely noticed. "Those who remain have chosen wisely," he said. "Trisolian will be remembered for its understanding." More loyalists stepped forward. The sons of Horus killed them. Bolter fire opened torsos. Power fists crushed bodies into the deck. A Mechanicum adept was caught beneath the talon, lifted screaming and torn lengthwise until his spine separated from the muscles surrounding it. Blood reached the War Master's boots. He walked through it without interrupting his address. Hester Aspertia Sigma Sigma found call after the assembly had been divided into labor, command, and disposal groups. "The priesthood survives," she said. Her noospheric presence remained controlled, but 3 defensive subroutines now surrounded her core identity. She expected hostility. Call looked past her. Low-ranking adepts had been chained together beside the processing pits. Dark Mechanicum chirurgeons moved along the line, marking useful limbs, organs, and implants. Those with valuable neural architecture were led toward extraction frames. Those judged inefficient were shot and pushed into rendering vats. A worker struggled while a servo arm opened his chest. The machine ignored his screams. It separated the ribs, reached into the cavity, and removed both lungs, while the heart continued beating. The worker watched his organs rise before him, mouth opening and closing soundlessly until he collapsed into the pit. Aspertia followed Call's gaze. "Facilities remain functional," she said. "Archives remain intact. The War Master has accepted the system's submission. Correction, he has accepted its usefulness. The distinction does not negate survival." Cal transmitted records from the execution channels. Aspertia rejected them. Predicted losses were greater under continued resistance. "Your equation included bodies. It did not include identity. Identity without continuity is meaningless. Continuity beneath corruption is contamination." Around them, Sotanul's command code spread deeper into the heptagon. Sacred machine canticles were overwritten with invocation strings, whose structure hurt Call's organic mind. Defense engines accepted targeting doctrines that designated loyal Imperial vessels as prey. Manufactoria began adjusting production priorities toward weapons forbidden by Martian law. Aspertia sent him a projection. Trisolian's reactors remained stable. Its workforce had suffered less than 1% total loss. Its primary data vaults were unharmed. "Evidence," she said. Cal answered with an image of the extraction pits. "A different category of evidence. You privilege principle over survival. You have preserved the body of Trisolian while surrendering its mind. Mind can be restored. Not while you continue obeying those rewriting it." For the first time, Aspertia's defensive subroutines strengthened. Cal noted the response. She had become more than mistaken. She had become an obstacle. Far beyond Trisolian, the hidden mark burned inside the warp. Leman Russ stood over the Hrafenkel's strategium table while the trinary system unfolded in cold blue light. The principal star blazed at the center. The 2 lesser suns moved around it through long, murderous orbits, dragging electromagnetic storms and gravitic turbulence across the outer system. The rune aboard the vengeful spirit pulsed between them, weak, steady. Horus had not discovered it. Bjorn stood opposite his Primarch. Around them, Jarls, navigators, and fleet officers studied the projection in silence. "The greater Mandeville approach is watched," said the Hrafenkel's master of augurs. "The outer routes are controlled by traitor pickets. Translation there will reveal us before we can close. Russ moved one clawed finger through the image of the two red dwarfs. And here? The navigator hesitated. There is no stable corridor. That was not my question. Translation is possible at the lesser point. Survival after translation is less certain. The projection enlarged. The space between the red stars writhed with overlapping tides. Radiation blooms crossed the region in waves. Solar prominences rose from both stellar surfaces, vast enough to swallow fleets. Every calculation adjusted as the two suns continued their orbit. Bjorn studied the route. It will hide us. Yes, Russ said. It will also kill us. It will try. A fleet officer transmitted projected losses. Several ship markers dimmed immediately. Others turned amber as the calculations included shield failure, navigation error, and structural strain. Bjorn looked at Russ. How many vessels? Russ examined the orbital paths. We will reach attack range 3 hours after emergence. That is not what I asked. It is the answer that matters. Bjorn felt anger stir beneath his discipline. Russ had already accepted the losses, not as a possibility, as expenditure. Ships, crews, and warriors had become the price of compressing the enemy's warning from days to hours. 3 hours, Bjorn repeated. If the stars are merciful, they are not. No, Russ said. That is why Horus will not watch them closely. Bror Tyrfinger entered the strategium with his pack behind him. Blind Ragnar wore a helm whose eye lenses had been darkened permanently. Sensor veins rose from his gorget, feeding the awareness his ruined eyes could no longer provide. Himmlich carried a demolition harness packed with melter charges. Enrir the Fat was broad even for a legionary, his armor covered in old impact scars. Chattering Flocker spoke beneath his breath without pause, reciting insults toward absent enemies. Gren the Happy grinned at everyone as though he had arrived for a feast. Bror bowed only his head. You called. Russ indicated the vengeful spirit. You will board apart from the main assault. Find the inner transit systems, magazines, and command relays. Break whatever prevents Horus from dividing his strength. Flocker stopped speaking. That silence revealed more than protest. Bror studied the projection. Support? None. Extraction? If the ship remains willing to give you one. Gren laughed. Enrir looked at him. You find that pleasing? I was worried the mission might be difficult. Blind Ragnar tilted his head toward the fleet display. It is worse than difficult. Difficult missions occasionally end. Himmlich checked one of his melter charges. Then we need not carry provisions. Bror's expression did not change. We are the distraction. Russ met his eyes. You are the knife in the other hand. The hand often loses the knife. It does. No promise followed. Bror saluted with a fist against his breastplate. His pack answered in the same manner. They understood. The Hrafnkel translated at the lesser Mandeville point, with 39 warships behind it. Reality split around the fleet. Warp light tore across armor. One escort emerged spinning, its prow folded inward by forces no instrument could measure. Another materialized too close to the wake of a red dwarf and vanished beneath a storm of radiation before reporting damage. The surviving ships entered the killing space between the stars. Warning runes covered the Hrafnkel's bridge. Void shields flared under stellar pressure. The hull groaned like a wounded beast. Deep within the vessel, mortal crewmen died as conduits ruptured and gravity shifted without warning. Russ watched the fleet settle into formation. Radiation drowned their emissions. Electromagnetic storms shattered auger returns. The traitor pickets remained distant points of light, blind to the wolves moving through the fire. Silence all non-essential transmissions, Russ ordered. One by one, the fleet's voices died. 40 warships accelerated between the two red suns, carrying their warriors toward the vengeful spirit and the brother waiting within it. The solar prominence struck the Skjolda before its warning klaxons completed their first cry. It rose from the nearer red sun as a continent of incandescent plasma. A hooked wall of stellar fire hurled millions of kilometers into the void. The escort vessel saw it too late. Its helm ordered an evasive burn, but the command became meaningless before the engines could answer. The prominence engulfed the ship. Void shields ignited white. For a heartbeat, the Skjolder became brighter than any weapon forged by man. Its shield envelope swelled around it, rippling beneath energies intended to consume worlds rather than warships. Defense relays overloaded in sequence. Projector towers burst from the hull. Molten copper and atomized crew blasted into space from ruptured housings. The first shield collapsed. The second lasted half a breath longer. When the stellar fire touched armor, the Skjolder's outer plates peeled away like burning bark. Kilometers of adamantium blistered, softened, and tore free. Compartments opened beneath them. Mortal crewmen were flash-cooked at their stations before pain reached their brains. Their skin blackened. Their eyes burst. Blood became steam inside arteries and split bodies from within. On the bridge, officers fused into command thrones. In the gun decks, ammunition crews became layers of scorched meat baked against bulkheads. Servitors continued loading. Shells while their organic components burned, machine limbs repeating sacred motions inside a furnace. The Skjolder broke amidships. Its spine twisted. The prow rolled away from the engines, trailing molten decks, bodies and chains of incandescent machinery. Reactor containment failed several seconds later. The ship's heart opened in a sphere of blue-white flame that consumed whatever remained. The rout did not slow. Bjorn watched the escort die upon the Hrafnkel's command display. Its fleet rune vanished without ceremony. No death chant followed. No order was given to recover survivors, because there were none to recover and no time in which to mourn them. The Gloriana-class battleship plunged onward between the red suns. The killing space punished every vessel within it. Gravitational tides pulled against the fleet from opposing directions, changing with each moment of the stellar orbit. The Hrafnkel's hull groaned as if some vast predator had closed its jaws around the ship. Armor plates flexed, internal supports cracked, entire passageways buckled and crushed those inside them. "Correction burn," called the master of the helm. The command deck tilted. Bjorn's maglocks caught him before the acceleration hurled him across the chamber. Mortal officers were less fortunate. One slammed face first into a plotting station. His skull opened against the metal edge, spraying blood and fragments of teeth across the hololithic controls. Deep within the ship, engines roared beyond safe tolerance. Casualty runes multiplied. A coolant conduit ruptured in the third engineering vault. Superheated vapor stripped flesh from dozens of thralls, leaving red muscle hanging from bone before the pressure burst their lungs. A gravitic compensator failed near the portside macro batteries. Hundreds of gunners were thrown against the rear bulkhead by the force of the course correction. Bodies struck metal hard enough to collapse rib cages and drive spinal columns through armor. Those who survived crawled through blood to reload weapons whose breaches were larger than hab blocks. A navigator screamed within his sealed sanctum. The sound reached the command deck through warded vox links, transformed by static into a shrill metallic howl. Blood ran from his third eye and filled the sockets of the other two. Attendant serfs held him upright while he guided the fleet through currents that did not belong to the warp, yet possessed all its malice. Russ stood before the main display. He read every report. Bjorn knew it because his Primarch's eyes moved whenever another compartment died. Russ saw the numbers. He saw the names of ships falling behind, the reactor warnings, the crew losses, and the navigator's declining function. He altered nothing. Another course correction rolled through the vessel. A command servitor tore free from its mounting. Its brass spine snapped. Organic tissue stretched between machine housings until it split, smearing the deck with grey matter and preservative gel. Russ did not look away from the stars. Bjorn approached him. "The Skjolder is gone." I saw. "The Gamma reports shield failure. The bloodied spear has lost primary steering. They will compensate. The bloodied spear cannot compensate. Then it will follow as long as it can. Bjorn stared at his father's profile. And when it cannot? Russ's eyes remained upon the projection. It will have carried us closer. There was no cruelty in the words. That made them crueler. The fleet had entered the Stellar Straits because Russ had chosen a road no rational admiral would accept. Every death now purchased concealment. To turn aside would not save those already burned, crushed, or cooked within failing ships. It would only render their deaths useless. Bjorn understood the calculation. He hated it because he understood. Across the command display, the route moved as a wedge of pale runes through a storm of interference. Nearly 40,000 legionaries traveled aboard the Hrafnkel and the surviving principal warships. Grey Slayers, Hunter Packs, Huskarls, Varagir, Deathsworn, Rune Priests, Iron Priests, Apothecaries, and the mortal hosts required to carry them through the void. Ahead waited approximately 50 traitor capital ships. The Sons of Horus formed the heart of the enemy concentration around the vengeful spirit. Iron Warriors' vessels held disciplined positions near the system's industrial zones. Night Lords' cruisers prowled the outer approaches. World Eaters' ships clustered in aggressive, uneven groups, too eager for boarding action to maintain clean fleet geometry. Word-bearers' vessels carried cathedral spires and vast devotional sigils upon their hulls. Alpha Legion warships drifted at the margins, their identities uncertain, and their intentions more so. Dark Mechanicum engines moved among them. Mortal transports, ordnance barges, and captured defense ships filled the gaps. The enemy held the system. The route possessed only the advantage of being where no sane commander expected it to be. Horus remained within the heptalagon. He had received the latest fleet dispositions, while Sotanul continued the integration of Trisolian's command architecture. Reports drifted before him in luminous columns. Loyalist resistance had ended in most principal facilities. Production was resuming. Orbital batteries had accepted new authorization codes. The system would soon feed the advance toward Beta Garman. As Sons of Horus Fleetmaster stood before the Warmaster. Outer auger nets remained degraded by the lesser stars, the officer said. The Alpha Legion advises expanded picket sweeps. Horus glanced at the projection. The Alpha Legion advises suspicion, because suspicion is the only ground upon which they feel secure. There remains a possibility of attack. There is always a possibility. The Fleetmaster waited. Horus enlarged the region between the red dwarfs. Radiation storms made the display flicker. Gravitational estimates contradicted one another as the stars moved. No fleet will pass there in battle order, Horus said. The officer studied the region. A desperate commander might attempt it. A desperate commander might also ram his own flagship into a sun. We do not arrange strategy around every conceivable act of madness. The words were reasoned. The Stellar Straits offered no stable navigation route. Their radiation would blind augurs, but it would also strip shields and cripple vessels before they reached attack range. Even if a fleet survived translation at the lesser Mandeville Point, it would emerge scattered, damaged, and unable to coordinate. Horus's confidence rested upon naval truth. He had broken empires by understanding what commanders could and could not risk. He had won wars before they began by reducing the enemy's choices until only predictable actions remained. He did not yet know that Russ had never considered self-destruction a disqualifying cost. Aboard the Hrafnkel, the wolves prepared to board. The mustering vaults echoed with weapons tests and oath cant. Legionaries sealed the final plates of their armor. Maglocks engaged with heavy clacks. Armorers moved through the ranks, checking reactor output, ammunition feeds, and pressure seals. Bolt magazines filled with mass reactive rounds were locked into weapons. Combi bolters were blessed with oil and blood. Plasma guns whined as caged stars awakened inside their coils. Warriors painted runes across breaching shields. Some marked names, some marked debts. Some painted only the shape of an open mouth, signifying a death that would swallow all songs. Jawland hunter packs filled the reservoirs of their hand flamers and checked the promethium lines running beneath their vambraces. Varagir tested frost axes, whose molecular edges could separate ceramite at the grain. Huskarls ran whetstones along blades that did not need sharpening, because ritual was not always performed for the benefit of the weapon. Apothecaries passed among them with stimulant injectors. They distributed combat compounds, coagulants and pain suppressors. Then they opened the gene seed vaults and counted empty receptacles. There were thousands. The sight silenced even the loudest packs. Those vessels were intended to return carrying the future of dead warriors. Everyone present understood that many would remain empty because no apothecary would survive to reach the bodies. Bjorn walked the mustering line. A young warrior struck his fist against his breastplate as Bjorn passed. "Will we take the flagship?" Bjorn looked at him. The warrior's helm had been painted with fresh runes. None carried the wear of long war. "No." The warrior hesitated. Bjorn continued. "We will enter it. What happens after that belongs to the dead." The answer spread through the pack. No one cheered. Russ addressed his commanders within a secondary stratagem, while the Hrafnkel shook around them. He did not show them the full battle plan. Each Jarl received only the fragment necessary to perform his task. Some ships would strike the Iron Warriors and prevent them forming a stable gun line. Others would break the World Eater's approach and draw their boarding vessels away from the center. Fast escorts would attack the Night Lords at the edge of the formation. Assault carriers would force the word-bearers to defend their own hulls. Every order drove toward the same hidden purpose. The Hrafnkel had to reach the vengeful spirit. Its void shields had to collapse, fluctuate or overload long enough for boarding craft to pass. Russ had to enter the flagship. Nothing else constituted victory. "What if the enemy closes around us?" asked one Jarl. "Hold them open." "With what?" "Your ships." The Jarl's expression hardened. "You order us to ram. I order you to prevent reinforcement. Use guns while you have them. Use engines when you do not." Another commander gestured toward the projected strength of the traitor fleet. "The fleet battle cannot be won." Russ looked around the chamber. "The fleet battle is not the battle." Understanding moved through the Jarls. Some glanced toward the spear resting in Russ's hand. None asked whether they would be extracted after delivering him. That question had died on Fenris. Within the heptalagon, Call detected the first echo. It appeared as a gravitic irregularity beyond the range where any vessel should have survived. Trisolian's augurs classified it as stellar turbulence and discarded it. Carl restored the data. A second echo appeared, then a third. They possessed no stable mass profile. Radiation swallowed their emissions, yet the anomalies moved against the natural drift of plasma and gravitational force. Ships. Carl tested the conclusion against projected routes. Every conventional approach failed. He examined the impossible one. The probability of a coordinated fleet crossing between the lesser stars remained negligible. Negligible was not zero. Carl opened the maintenance routines into which he had hidden his code. Fragment by fragment, the concealed sequences awakened. Agricultural lifts transmitted verification keys to ventilation controls. Cooling systems passed command fragments into ammunition conveyors. Waste recyclers carried loyal identifiers beneath the attention of Sotanol's supervisory architecture. Thalax cohorts held in storage received dormant reactivation signals. Myrmidon weapon locks registered temporary diagnostic exemptions. Carl did not know who approached. He knew only that the traitors would soon be required to look elsewhere. The stellar interference began to thin. Aboard the Hrafnkel, the main display cleared one fractured layer at a time. Enemy runes emerged ahead. The closest traitor ships were far nearer than the War Master's captains could have imagined. "Final correction," called the Master of the Helm. The fleet turned. Engines burned at full output. The Gamma failed during the maneuver. Its damaged shields collapsed as a radiation wave crossed the formation. Armor blackened. The vessel rolled away, its engine output diminishing until the star's gravity took hold. No rescue order came. The surviving warships accelerated. On the Vengeful Spirit, auger stations erupted with warnings. Hostile returns multiplied across every display. Collision alarms drowned command channels. Servitors shrieked range estimates, while officers demanded confirmation from systems that had no time to provide it. The wolves emerged from the stellar glare at attack velocity. They did not arrive in a clean formation. They arrived as wounded predators hurled from fire. The Hrafnkel led them, its armor scorched, its shields bleeding energy into space. Behind it came the ships that had survived the passage, some trailing debris, others burning from wounds inflicted by the stars. Traitor captains ordered turns. Capital ships answered slowly. Their mass resisted urgency. Engine decks surged, hulls groaned. Several vessels nearly collided as formations designed for measured maneuver attempted to rotate beneath immediate threat. Russ stood upon the command deck. The Vengeful Spirit appeared ahead, vast and unmistakable. "Range," he said. "Closing. Enemy shields? Active. Fire." The Hrafnkel spoke with every weapon that could bear. Torpedoes launched in swarms, their drives igniting like a new constellation. Lance batteries discharged columns of coherent light. Macro cannons hurled shells whose impact could shatter city districts. The rest of the fleet answered. The void between the armadas became a storm of ordnance. A traitor escort attempted to turn across the salvo. Lance fire struck it along the spine. The first beam cut through armor. The second passed through open decks and emerged from the opposite flank. The ship split into two burning halves. Atmosphere erupted from the wound, carrying crewmen, furniture, ammunition, and torn machinery into space. Another vessel took a torpedo through its launch bays. The warhead detonated among fueled gunships. The carrier vomited fire. Assault craft tumbled from the open bay, some burning, some colliding with one another. Bodies spun among them. Unexploded ordnance drifted through the wreckage before secondary blasts consumed whole sections of the ship. Iron warriors returned fire with disciplined precision. Macro shells struck the Space Wolves formation. One hit an escort amidships and collapsed 3 decks into a single layer of metal and flesh. Another tore through a gunship carrier, exposing its embarkation vaults. Hundreds of armored warriors and mortal crew were pulled into the void, bodies freezing as they scattered. The Hrafnkel did not turn toward the vulnerable ships. Russ ignored crippled escorts. He ignored the Word-Bearer's carrier struggling to raise shields and the World Eater's vessel presenting its broadside during an undisciplined turn. His clawed hand closed over the command rail. Mark the flagship. The hololithic display narrowed until only one enemy vessel remained, the Vengeful Spirit. "Attack vector confirmed," said the Master of the Helm. "Drive us into her." The Hrafnkel turned its prow toward the War Master's ship. Aboard the Vengeful Spirit, Horus watched the attack line form. He saw the damaged Gloriana ignore every easier kill. He saw the surrounding wolves spread out to entangle his escorts. He saw the suicidal clarity of the design. Understanding arrived without anger. Leman had crossed the stars to reach him. Of all his brothers, the Wolf King had chosen the road no tactician should choose, paid the cost no sane commander should accept, and appeared from a place where no fleet should have survived. Horus smiled. Not because he had expected Russ, because one of the few brothers still capable of surprising him had finally come to die. The void became a slaughterhouse without walls. Across Trisolian, warships exchanged fire over distances large enough to contain worlds. The ranges should have made battle seem clean. There was nothing clean in the dying of a capital ship. Lance beams crossed the darkness in spears of hard white radiance. They struck armor with the heat of captive suns, cutting through kilometers of decks before bleeding away into molten metal and vaporized flesh. Macro cannon shells followed more slowly, each one a cathedral-sized mass of explosive wrath. When they hit, entire crew sections ceased to exist as separate spaces. Bulkheads, machinery, and thousands of men were compacted together into strata of ruptured bodies, coolant, and folded steel. A word-bearer's cruiser lost its bridge to a concentrated lance strike. The command spire vanished in white fire. Officers, helmsmen, and the mortal servants surrounding them became vapor before their shadows could form upon the walls. Yet the vessel continued firing. Battle cogitators inherited authority from dead commanders. Servitors worked ammunition hoists with their biological faces burning. The cruiser maintained its place in the enemy formation until a Space Wolves escort drove a spread of torpedoes through its exposed reactor decks. The ship opened like a gutted beast. Flame poured from its wound. Atmosphere and corpses streamed into space. Rows of devotional statues tumbled from the fractured hull, spinning among fragments of armor and frozen men. The Hrafnkel drove through the debris without slowing. Leman Russ stood at the center of its command deck, one hand gripping the spear of Russ, and the other closed around the tactical rail. The vengeful spirit filled the principal hololithic display. Its void. Shields pulsed around it in overlapping spheres, each layer turning aside the storm of fire directed against the War Master's flagship. "Distance closing," called the Master of the Helm. A macro shell struck the Hrafnkel. The impact drove a thunderclap through the Gloriana's bones. Deck plating buckled, lumen globes burst. Mortal officers fell from their stations as the vessel rolled beneath the blow. Bjorn remained upright through mag-locked boots and fury. Damage reports spread across the command display. The Iron Warriors had established interlocking fire corridors around the enemy center. Their vessels did not waste ammunition upon wounded escorts or isolated prey. They fired in measured sequence, creating zones through which the Space Wolves could advance only by accepting destruction. The World Eaters answered the ambush differently. Their ships broke formation and accelerated. Boarding rams extended from their prows. Assault claws and gunships launched before safe approach distances had been reached. They sought collision, not victory through maneuver. One World Eater's vessel drove directly into a Wolves escort, its armored prow punching through the smaller ship and exposing both crews to the void. Boarding alarms sounded only after warriors had begun killing one another across the fused decks. Night Lord's cruisers abandoned the center and hunted damaged vessels at the edge of the engagement. They struck where shields had failed, pouring lance fire into engine compartments and life support sections. Their Vox transmitters flooded loyalist channels with the screams of captured crewmen. The Sons of Horus ignored lesser targets. They aimed for the Hrafnkel. Sea-green capital ships turned their prows toward the Gloriana and concentrated every weapon upon its command decks, engines, and launch bays. Their captains understood the attack. Kill the flagship, kill the Wolf King, leave the rest of the 6th Legion to die without direction. Russ had denied them the time to coordinate. The enemy fleets reacted according to instinct, pride, and Legion doctrine. Iron Warriors formed lines, World Eaters charged, Night Lords circled, Sons of Horus struck for the throat. For several minutes, they fought separate wars. Russ intended to finish his before they remembered how to fight together. "Port shields failing," called an officer. "Reinforce them," Russ said. "Reserve projectors are already committed." "Then commit what remains." "There is nothing remaining." Russ looked toward him. The officer swallowed. "The port shield will collapse. Then turn the guns beneath it toward the flagship before it does." The order passed. Bjorn watched the portside batteries fire their final salvo. A heartbeat later, the Hrafnkel's outer shield failed. Enemy lances struck naked armor. The first beam tore through 3 gun decks. Weapon crews became incandescent outlines before disintegrating. Ammunition magazines ruptured. A chain of internal explosions raced along the vessel's flank, hurling turrets and fragments of armored superstructure into the void. The second beam opened a wound hundreds of meters long.
Atmosphere screamed through it. Burning crewmen were dragged from ruptured compartments, limbs flailing as they vanished into space. Others struck the edges of the breach and came apart, leaving ropes of intestines and shredded uniforms caught upon jagged metal. Servitors continued feeding shells into surviving weapons. One had lost everything below its pelvis. Its metal claws dragged its exposed spine through blood, while it pushed an ammunition charge toward the loading cradle. Fire consumed the organic tissue remaining around its face. The machine did not stop until a collapsing bulkhead crushed it into the deck. "Disengagement recommended," said the master of the helm. "No," Russ answered. "Another concentrated strike may break the portside spine." "No. The boarding distance can be recovered on a second approach." "There will be no second approach." The helmmaster looked to Bjorn as though the Primarch's son might translate madness into mercy. Bjorn understood the truth too well. If the Hrafnkel turned aside, the traitor formation would consolidate. Iron warriors would close the fire lanes. Sons of Horus would surround the flagship. The opportunity purchased with burned ships and dead navigators would close forever.
Russ had not crossed between the suns to survive the approach. He had crossed to enter the vengeful spirit. "Maintain course," Bjorn said. The helmmaster obeyed. In the launch vaults, warning klaxons howled. Boarding torpedoes waited in their cradles, packed with legionaries locked into restraint harnesses. Assault boats trembled beneath the violence shaking the Hrafnkel. Stormbirds and gunships rested upon launch rails, while armorers performed final checks under falling sparks. The target's shields remained active. Russ entered the embarkation deck with his Wolfguard around him. Hugin waited at the head of the launch line. The Stormbird's hull was scarred from earlier wars. Frost runes covered its wings. The spear and eye emblem of the rout had been painted across its prow in fresh blood. Bjorn followed Russ toward the assault ramp. "The shields have not fallen," he said. "They flicker. They will atomize half the launch. Then half will pass." Bjorn looked toward the warriors filing into boarding craft. "You speak of them as ammunition." Russ stopped. The deck shook beneath another impact. A fuel line ruptured overhead. Burning promethium rained across an empty section of deck until servitors smothered it beneath suppressant foam. "I speak of them as they are," Russ said. "As I am. They are your sons. And Horus will kill every son I preserve here if he reaches Terra with his strength unbroken." Russ leaned closer, his voice lowered. "Do not mistake my willingness to spend them for lack of love. It is because I know their worth that I know what their deaths may purchase." Bjorn said nothing. The answer did not ease his anger. It only denied him the comfort of believing his father careless. Russ turned toward the launch control pulpit. "Release them." The first wave fired. Boarding torpedoes erupted from the Hrafnkel's flank, their engines burning at full thrust. Assault boats followed. Gunships launched into a void already filled with torpedoes, debris, lance fire, and burning wreckage. The vengeful spirit's shields shimmered ahead. The first boarding torpedo struck the outer envelope and vanished. No explosion followed. No wreckage remained. The shield reduced armor, warriors and weapons to particles too small for augers to track. A second torpedo penetrated the first layer and died against the next. Its hull liquefied. Molten metal poured around the legionaries strapped inside. Their armor seals held for a fraction longer than the craft. Then heat entered the compartment and cooked them in their harnesses. Others passed through during the fluctuations. One emerged from the shield envelope with half its armor stripped away. The warriors inside were dead, their bodies charred and fused together, but the torpedo continued. It struck the flagship and buried itself through 3 decks. Another slammed into a defensive bastion. Unsecured mortal crewmen became red streaks across the compartment walls. The torpedo's prow opened, and surviving wolves charged through a chamber filled with broken bodies. Hugin launched. The Stormbird plunged through the battle with Russ aboard. Enemy fire crossed around it. The pilot drove between drifting wreckage, beneath the burning hull of a crippled escort, and through a cloud of frozen corpses. Bolt cannon fire from a traitor gunship struck Hugin's wing. Armor peeled away. Fuel ignited within a damaged line, trailing flame behind the craft. Russ stood at the head of the troop compartment. He did not hold a restraint. The spear burned in his hand with a white radiance that did not belong to any machine. "Outer shield," called the pilot. Hugin struck the barrier. Light swallowed the compartment. Bjorn felt every atom of his armor scream. The warriors around him became black silhouettes. One vanished when his damaged plate failed, body and ceramite turning to ash between one heartbeat and the next. Then darkness returned. Hugin had passed through. The main hangar of the Vengeful Spirit filled the forward display. Defense emplacements opened fire. Hugin's heavy weapons answered. Bolter shells and Lascannon beams raked the hangar mouth. Gun crews exploded behind their stations. One turret vanished beneath a direct hit, its operators reduced to fragments that sprayed across nearby aircraft. Enemy fire tore into the Stormbird. A chunk of the starboard wing spun, away. The craft rolled. Russ caught a support stanchion, while legionaries slammed against their harnesses. One restraint snapped. The warrior struck the ceiling head first, crushing his helm and filling it with brain matter. The pilot fought the dying craft. Hugin crossed the hangar threshold too fast. It smashed through a blast barrier. Armored doors buckled around the prow. The Stormbird struck the deck, bounced, then ground forward through fuel lines, maintenance servitors, and waiting armsmen. Bodies disappeared beneath its belly. Blood sprayed across the viewports. The craft stopped against a line of loading machinery. Its assault ramp fell open. Fire rolled inside. Russ walked through it. The first defenders were mortal armsmen in green and black void armor. Their weapons rose. Russ moved before they fired. The spear of Russ left his hand. It crossed the hangar in a line of white light and struck the Contemptor pattern war engine, advancing from a reinforced bay. The spear entered through the dreadnought's breastplate. Its power field passed through atomantic shielding, armor, and the sarcophagus within. The machine stopped. Light erupted from its joints. The ancient warrior imprisoned inside screamed through external speakers as the spear's energy opened him from within. Armor plates bulged. Cables snapped. The Contemptor detonated, throwing tons of burning metal across the hangar. One fragment struck a squad of armsmen and cut 3 men in half. Russ drew Mjolnir. The sword came free with a sound like ice breaking upon a winter sea. The sons of Horus charged him. The first legionary swung a chain axe toward Russ's neck. Mjolnir cut through the weapon, the warrior's gauntlets and his helm in one stroke. The top of the legionary's skull spun away. Brain matter sprayed the men behind him. Russ struck the second with his free hand. The blow crushed breastplate, ribs, and both hearts. The warrior's back burst open. Fragments of vertebrae and armor flew through the armsmen behind him, punching into faces and throats. A third fired a bolter at point-blank range. Russ turned aside. The shells detonated across his pauldron. He seized the legionary by the head and drove him through the deck. Ceramite cracked. The skull inside collapsed. Russ lifted the ruined body and threw it hard enough to break another warrior's spine. The wolf guard followed him into the hangar. Bolters roared. Frost blades cut sea-green armor apart. Boarding shields struck like mobile walls, breaking limbs and crushing defenders beneath their edges. Hugin burned behind them, while more assault craft screamed through the hangar mouth. Across the Vengeful Spirit, the rout arrived in fragments. Jorland hunter packs breached a barracks deck and filled it with burning promethium. Sons of Horus woke inside sealed armor racks to find flame pouring through their cells. Their flesh blackened beneath half-fitted plate as wolves dragged them free and butchered them. Grey Slayers entered an ammunition transit corridor. Their torpedo struck hard enough to kill a third of the pack. The survivors climbed over pulped brothers and charged into loading crews with axes and bolters. Varagir landed inside a corrupted shrine. They tore down icons raised to powers without names and killed the word-bearers guarding them. Blood ran through ritual grooves cut into the floor. Deathsworn breached near the reactor levels. They emerged from their torpedo already howling, black armor marked for death, axes striking anything that moved. Thousands of battles began at once. Some packs knew where they were, others did not. All moved toward the center. Far below, Karl released the first concealed command. Dormant code assembled across Trisolian systems. Maintenance routines linked. Cooling checks became authentication strings. Waste processors transmitted weapon permissions into sealed cohort vaults. Thalaxi awakened. Myrmidon engines powered up. Hester Aspertia detected the intrusion. "You will cease," she told Karl. They stood within a command annex overlooking the Heptalagon's lower assembly chambers. Traitor alarms had begun sounding throughout the complex. Sotanul's attention was divided between the unexpected fleet attack and the defense of the system. Karl continued transmitting. "Renewed resistance will provoke extermination," Aspertia said. "Extermination has already begun. The facilities remain intact. The facilities are occupied. The priesthood survives. The priesthood is being dismantled." Aspertia extended a mechadendrite toward the command interface. Karl severed it with a cutting beam. She recoiled. "You mistake obstinacy for loyalty," she said. "You mistake obedience for survival." Aspertia's weapon implants activated. Karl had already calculated the outcome. He transmitted a false diagnostic to her motive systems. Her left limbs locked. She turned too slowly. Karl fired into her central thoracic housing. The Volkite beam passed through armor and ignited the flesh preserved within. Heat spread through her body. Organic components combusted around the machinery sustaining them.
Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Support really helps.
Aspertia screamed in Binharic. The sound contained accusation, disbelief, and a final appeal to shared purpose. Karl fired again. Her cranial casing ruptured. Burning neural tissue sprayed across the command console. Her remaining limbs struck the floor and continued moving after her consciousness had ended. Karl removed her authority seal. Trisolian's loyalist machines accepted new command. Thalax cohorts opened fire upon traitor guards. Myrmidon destructors emerged from storage vaults with weapons already charged. Plasma and Volkite fire ripped through corrupted Skitari. Dark Mechanicum adepts died beneath machines they believed conquered. The attack rose from below. In the void, the vengeful spirit's shields failed. The Hrafnkel fired into them at point-blank range. 2 Space Wolves cruisers died maintaining the angle. One placed itself between the flagship and an Iron Warrior's broadside. Macro shells tore it apart, but its destruction gave the Gloriana several uninterrupted seconds. The shields collapsed. Boarding craft crossed the final distance. Thousands of wolves struck the hull. Bjorn watched them arrive from the vengeful spirit's hangar, seeing the cost written across every tactical rune. Whole ships had disappeared from the fleet display. Packs had burned inside torpedoes. Mortal crews had died by the tens of thousands, all to create this opening. Deep within the flagship, Ezekiel Abaddon stood before Horus. "Concentrate the Justarin around you," the first captain said. "Seal the inner decks. We can crush the borders against the hull." Horus looked toward the distant thunder of battle. "No." Abaddon's jaw tightened. "Russ is aboard." "I know." "Then he must not reach you." Horus smiled. "Let him come far enough that retreat becomes impossible." The talon of Horus closed around his hand. Its claws awakened in a corona of murderous energy. The Warmaster lifted Worldbreaker from its cradle. "When I kill my brother," he said, "his sons will learn what becomes of wolves without a king." The vengeful spirit changed around them. Bjorn saw the corridor stretch. One moment the far blast door stood less than 30 meters away, framed by green warning lumens and the corpses of sons of Horus armsmen. The next, the walls drew outward with the sound of iron dragged across bone. 30 meters became 100. 100 became half a kilometer. The door receded until it was a dark square at the end of an impossible tunnel. His armor map insisted nothing had changed. The corridor remained the same length. The deck remained level. The nearest bulkhead remained precisely where the ship's schematics claimed it should be. Bjorn looked behind him. The breach through which his pack had entered was gone. In its place stood a wall covered in Chthonian kill markings. Human teeth had been hammered into the metal around every symbol. Several were fresh enough to bleed. "Do not ask the ship where we are," Bjorn said. "It has begun lying." The warriors with him raised bolters and axes. Their auto-sensors tracked heat signatures moving inside the walls. Some resembled men crawling through maintenance ducts. Others were too large, too long, or possessed too many limbs. A scratching sound followed the pack from beneath the deck. One wolf spat a curse. Another whispered, "Maleficarum." Bjorn turned his helm toward him. "Name it later. Kill it first." The pack advanced. Far ahead, the blast door opened. It did not reveal the chamber beyond. It opened onto a hangar that should have lain kilometers above them, filled with damaged gunships and hanging chains. A burning assault craft lay on its side across the deck. Bodies swung from the rafters, each corpse stripped of armor and opened from throat to groin. The door closed before Bjorn's pack reached it. When it opened again, there was only darkness. Elsewhere in the flagship, the Jorland hunter packs burned a road for the Wolf King. They advanced in ordered ranks despite the savagery painted across their armor. Hand flamers extended from their gauntlets. Larger flame weapons rested in the grips of warriors moving at the center of each formation. Chainswords snarled. Fenrisian axes struck shields in a slow, deliberate rhythm. The sons of Horus waited beyond a barricade of overturned transit cars. Russ could smell them through his helm filters. Hot ceramite, weapon oil, adrenal stimulants, blood. He raised 2 fingers. The hunters opened fire. Promethium crossed the junction in converging sheets. The flames met above the barricade and rolled downward as a single scouring tempest. Mortal armsmen vanished inside it. Their uniforms ignited. Skin blistered from faces. Men dropped weapons and clawed at sealed helmets while their lungs cooked. The sons of Horus endured longer. Fire wrapped around their armor and entered through damaged seals. Internal systems flooded their plates with warning tones. Some continued firing while the flesh beneath their ceramite charred. Fat liquefied inside them and ran from knee joints with melted sealant. One warrior staggered from cover with both eye lenses burning and fired until his bolter ammunition detonated against his breastplate. The flames diminished. Russ lowered his hand. The hunters charged. They crossed the burning ground before the defenders could recover. Chainswords struck armor. Axes bit into gorgets and elbows. Frag grenades rolled beneath the barricade and burst among the wounded, filling the space with fragments of metal, bone, and burning cloth. A hunter drove his chainsword into a Sons of Horus legionary beneath the arm. The teeth caught between ribs and dragged the blade deeper. The traitor seized the wolf by the helm and fired a bane strike round into his faceplate. The shell penetrated, detonated, and blew brain matter through the rear of the helm. The dead wolf remained upright for several seconds because his chainsword was trapped in the enemy's chest. Then both warriors fell together. The chieftains came through the fire behind boarding shields. They moved in a disciplined wall, sea-green plate blackened by promethium. Bane-strike bolters fired through shield gaps. Their rounds tore into the hunters at close range, penetrating armor before bursting within gene-forged bodies. A wolf lost his entire abdomen. The shell opened him from spine to pelvis, spilling ropes of intestine across his thighs. He dropped his bolter, wrapped one arm around the exposed mass as though he could hold himself together, and charged anyway. A chieftain's power fist removed his head. The Chthonian formation did not break. They protected their officers and standards with the loyalty of killers who had learned brotherhood in gang tunnels before they learned the language of empire. Their shields locked. Chain axes rose and fell. Power weapons burned through frost blades. Narrow corridors became grinding walls of ceramite where men died too close together to collapse. Russ entered the shield line. He struck the first barrier with his shoulder. The boarding shield folded around its bearer. The legionary behind it vanished beneath crushed armor and pulverized organs. Russ drove the ruined shield backward into the formation, knocking 3 chieftains from their feet. Mjolnir cut across the opening. A power fist spun away from its owner. The return stroke opened a second warrior from groin to throat. Entrails burst across the chieftain behind him, steaming against scorched plate. Russ caught the standard bearer by the neck. The legionary fired his bolter into the Primarch's chest. Mass reactive shells burst against the armor of Elavagar. Russ tightened his grip until the warrior's gorget collapsed and vertebrae broke beneath his fingers. He did not kill him. He hurled the crippled chieftain through an open doorway into the communications chamber beyond. The body struck a control altar and broke it apart. Russ followed. He cut down the signal adepts, tore the central relay from its mounting, and drove the spear of Russ through the primary command core. White light spread across. The machine. Cogitators screamed through every speaker in the room as their data stacks burned. "Leave that one breathing," Russ said. A hunter raised his axe over the wounded standard bearer. The blade stopped. The chieftain lay on his back, throat crushed, legs bent beneath him. Wet clicks escaped his mouth. One hand clawed uselessly at the deck. A wolf looked toward his Primarch. Why? His brothers will hear him. Russ turned toward the next junction. They will come to recover their standard. That is what loyal sons do. Behind him, the chieftain began to choke upon his own blood. Russ had destroyed the relay because it controlled access to the inner decks. He had left the warrior alive because suffering traveled farther than any signal. To outsiders, the Wolf King fought as a beast. His sons knew better. Every roar concealed a calculation. Every sudden charge struck a point chosen moments before the enemy recognized its value. He tore apart command stations, transit hubs, and reinforcement routes. He allowed wounded enemies to scream in places where the sound would draw reserves away from Bror Tyrfinger's path. Night Lords called such methods terror. Russ called them war. The mortal crew attacked in their hundreds. They came through the service ways wearing void suits, maintenance harnesses, and the green-black uniforms of the War Master's flagship. Some carried lascarbines. Others wielded cutting torches, boarding axes, and industrial rivet guns. Chemical feed tubes entered their necks. Black fluid moved through transparent lines into swollen veins. Many were already dying. Their eyes had turned dark. Blood ran from noses and mouths. Some bore symbols carved into their faces. Others had torn away their own lips so that every expression resembled a grin. They charged without fear because whatever moved them had burned fear from their minds. The wolves killed them without pause. Bolter fire crossed the passage. Mortal bodies burst against bulkheads. A round struck one crewman through the hip and detonated inside his pelvis, separating both legs from his torso. Another lost his chest in a spray of ribs and organs. The man behind him continued running until fragments of his comrade's spine struck his face. Boarding shields hit the first rank. Bodies folded beneath their edges. Skulls cracked. Arms and shoulders were trapped against the deck and crushed under power-armored boots. Chainswords tore through the survivors, dragging loops of intestine into the air and throwing blood across the ceiling. The crew kept coming. One climbed onto a wolf's back and drove a cutting torch into the seal beneath his helm. White flame entered the gorget. The legionary seized the mortal by the skull and ripped his face away against the edge of his pauldron. Another crewman detonated a demolition charge beneath a shield line. The blast filled the corridor with fire and fragments. 2 wolves disappeared. A third emerged without one arm, his armor split open from shoulder to hip. He advanced 3 more steps before his organs slid from the breach and struck the deck around his boots. Russ did not order the advance slowed. Hesitation would allow the flagship to close around them. The mortal dead formed banks against the walls. Wolves climbed over them, boots sinking into bodies. Blood flooded deck drains faster than the ship could process it. Then the possessed came. They had once been legionaries. The first crawled along the ceiling on 6 limbs. Its sea-green armor had fused with exposed muscle. Antlers grew from its spine, scraping sparks from the walls. A vertical mouth opened through its breastplate, filled with human teeth. Bolter fire struck it. The rounds detonated within its torso. Black blood and burning meat sprayed across the corridor. The creature continued moving. It dropped into the formation. Claws passed through a wolf's breastplate and pulled both hearts from his chest. The organs beat in the possessed's hand before it crushed them and forced the pulp into the mouth within its armor. A second creature tore through the wall. Its head had vanished beneath a crown of bone. Arms divided at the elbows into clusters of talons. Human faces pushed outward from its abdomen, screaming as the demon moved. The loyalist formation ruptured. One possessed seized a hunter by the leg and swung him into the walls until his armor opened. The legionary inside became a sack of broken bones. Another creature bit through a wolf's helm and tore the upper half of his skull away. Conventional wounds slowed them, but did not kill them. Axes opened flesh that closed around the blades. Plasma burned cavities through bodies that filled with writhing black tissue. Severed limbs crawled across the floor and reattached themselves. The rune priests advanced. Their staffs struck the deck. Fenrisian runes flared across armor and weaponry. The air filled with the scent of snow, ozone, and deep winter. The leading Gothi spoke a word that hurt every mortal ear. Lightning crossed the corridor. It struck the possessed upon the ceiling and spread through its antlers. The creature convulsed. Its chest split. A shape of oily smoke began to pull free, clawing at the flesh around it as though the body were a wound refusing to close. Russ raised the spear. Its pale light filled the passage. The demonic growths recoiled. Antlers cracked. Fused armor peeled away from muscle. Mouths opened across the possessed and screamed with different voices. The spirit inside the first host was dragged outward in a rope of burning organs, black vapor, and grasping hands. Russ thrust the spear into it. The demon ignited. Its host burst apart, covering the corridor in charred flesh and strips of armor. The other possessed hesitated, only for a heartbeat. The wolves used it. Frost blades severed limbs. Power axes split skulls. Rune fire entered open wounds and forced the things within to emerge. The demons came out screaming, dragging intestines and lungs behind them like the entrails of murdered gods. The flagship drank the sound. Bjorn heard packs vanish from the Vox. The first transmission ended in gunfire. The second became a howl that lengthened until it no longer sounded like a legionary. The third pack reported reaching an armory deck, though Bjorn's schematics placed them beside the primary engines. Then their signal moved upward through 30 decks in less than a second. Then it ceased. Bjorn led his pack through a maintenance cathedral filled with hanging chains. The chamber should not have existed upon their route. Its walls were lined with statues of the Emperor, whose faces had been replaced by those of Horus. "Russ lies forward," said one warrior. His locator rune pointed toward the floor. A second warrior's rune pointed back the way they had come. Bjorn's showed the Primarch moving inside the wall. "We follow the killing," Bjorn said. "Which killing?" "The louder one." The deck collapsed beneath the rear of the pack. 3 wolves fell into darkness. One caught the edge and hung from a single hand. Bjorn reached for him. Something below caught the warrior first. The legionary vanished. His screams stopped with a wet crack. Bjorn looked into the hole. Hundreds of pale hands moved in the darkness beneath. "Seal it." A crack grenade dropped into the opening. The blast filled the shaft with fire, blood, and fragments of fingers. They continued. An ambush struck them at the next junction. Sons of Horus fired from murder slits, while corrupted Skitarii advanced through the cross passage. Radium rounds sparked against armor. Banestrike bolts detonated within the formation. Bjorn charged the firing line. He drove his blade through the nearest slit and felt it enter a body. He twisted until the wall behind the aperture filled with screaming. Then he tore the weapon sideways, opening armor, ribs and throat. His pack breached the position with melter charges. The wall collapsed. Bjorn entered through smoke and killed the defenders at arm's length. He cut one Sons of Horus warrior from shoulder to waist. He smashed another's helm against a bulkhead until the metal caved inward and grey matter leaked through the eye lenses. A wounded traitor crawled toward a dropped pistol. Bjorn planted a boot upon his spine. "Where is the inner sanctum?" The warrior laughed blood into his helm. "The ship will never let you reach him." Bjorn leaned harder. Vertebrae broke one after another. "Then the ship can die before I do." He crushed the legionary's back and moved on. Bror Tearfinger's pack travelled without light. Blind Ragnar led them. His ruined eyes had long ago surrendered to darkness, but the sensor vanes around his helm read vibration, pressure, and electromagnetic change. Where ordinary auto-senses failed, Ragnar felt the ship through his boots and armor. "Turn left," he said. "There is no left," Himmlich answered. A blank wall stood beside them. Ragnar pointed. Enrir the Fat struck it with a power maul. The metal split. Behind it lay a transit tunnel absent from every deck plan. Gren the Happy peered into the darkness. "The ship likes him." "The ship pities him," said chattering Floka. "It assumes he cannot see how ugly it is." "I can hear your face," Ragnar said. "It remains offensive." They entered. Himmlich carried enough melter charges to open a cruiser from within. Their mission was simple in the way only suicidal orders were simple. Reach the magazine complexes, rupture ammunition stores, destroy internal transit, force Abaddon to divide the Justarin between protecting Horus and preserving the flagship. No support would come. No extraction route had been promised. Enrir glanced at the demolition harness. "How large an explosion?" Himmlich considered. "Large enough that we will not need to describe it afterward." Gren laughed. Floka did not. The tunnel shifted behind them. Bror turned and saw the walls close together, sealing the route by which they had entered. "Horus knows we are here," he said. "Good," Gren replied. "I was beginning to feel ignored." Across the vengeful spirit, doors sealed around isolated packs. Elevators opened into vacuum. Passageways folded back upon themselves. Wolves followed the sound of battle and emerged into chambers filled only with their own dead. Whether Horus commanded the ship through corrupted systems or imposed his will upon it through the power taken at Moloch no longer mattered. The flagship hated them. It digested the route one pack at a time. Russ reached the first threshold to the inner sanctum. Hundreds of corpses lay behind him. Sons of Horus, armsmen, Skitari, possessed, wolves. His sons were scattered among the dead, grey armor broken, pelts soaked black, frost blades buried in enemies they had killed before falling. One wolf still lived without the lower half of his body. He raised a bloody fist as Russ passed. "Go!" he rasped. Russ went. The threshold towered ahead, a blast door thick enough to survive a reactor breach. Chthonian script covered its surface. Fresh blood ran through the engraved marks, though no wound fed it. Every Vox grill in the corridor opened. Horus spoke through them all. "Come deeper, Leman." The voice was warm, affectionate. "I have waited too long to welcome you." Russ placed both hands around the spear. White fire gathered along its blade. He drove it into the door. The weapon passed through armor, mechanisms, and the darkness behind them. Light erupted through the Chthonian script. The blast door split from top to bottom. Russ threw back his head and howled. The sound traveled through kilometers of corrupted decking. It shook dust from sealed vaults, silenced mortal crews, and carried to the throne chamber where the War Master waited. The ship answered with a groan. For the first time since the wolves had entered it, the vengeful spirit sounded afraid. Ezekiel Abaddon moved through the vengeful spirit as though the flagship were an extension of his own wrath. Warning lumens washed his black cataphractii plate in red. The Justarin advanced around him, broad enough to fill the arterial corridors of the ship. Their armor bore the scars of conquest from one end of the galaxy to the other, every gouge and scorched plate a testament to wars fought when the Imperium had still believed itself immortal. Now the sons of Fenris had brought war into their father's home. That insult required an answer. Abaddon did not roar. He did not curse Russ or waste breath promising extinction. He studied the tactical feeds scrolling across his visor and built the shape of the boarding assault from fragments. The wolves had entered on dozens of decks. Some packs advanced directly toward the inner sanctum. Others attacked magazines, transit systems, command relays, and weapon control nexuses. They fought like savages, only when seen from the front. Viewed across the totality of the flagship, their violence revealed discipline. Every breach supported another. Every dead pack opened a route for the next. Russ had not come to seize the vengeful spirit. He had come to reach Horus. That understanding sharpened Abaddon's anger into purpose. Seal the lower axial routes, he ordered. Vent the eastern armories. Flood the tertiary passages with fuel vapor and ignite them after the wolves enter. A Justarin officer transmitted acknowledgement. "First Captain," another said, "the inner guard requests reinforcement. They have enough. The Wolf King has crossed the first threshold." "I know." Abaddon turned toward a descending transit shaft. The doors had been cut apart from within. Bodies lay piled before the opening. Sons of Horus and wolves mingled so completely that blood had stripped distinction from their armor. "The Primarch is not the only blade aboard this ship," he said. "We break the hand holding the others." The Justarin entered the shaft. They descended without haste. Cataphracti armor made speed unnecessary. The corridors constrained every charge, every leap, and every attempt to outflank them. The wolves could move faster, but speed meant little when the road narrowed to the width of a boarding shield. At the bottom of the shaft, the first pack waited. Fenrisian legionaries had built a barricade from dead armsmen and ruptured maintenance machinery. Their bolters fired the moment the Justarin appeared. Mass reactive shells struck black plate. One cracked an eye lens and detonated within the helm. The Justarin warrior jerked backward. Blood and cerebral tissue sprayed from his gorget. He remained standing for a breath before collapsing against the Terminator behind him. Abaddon raised his combi bolter. The Justarin fired as one. The barricade dissolved beneath the fusillade. Bodies burst apart. A wolf lost both arms and most of his chest, his spine remaining upright inside the wreckage of his plate. Another was struck through the abdomen. The detonation emptied his torso against the wall, leaving his legs and lower spine twitching beneath him. The surviving wolves charged. They came howling over the dead, axes raised, chain blades screaming. Abaddon met the first with his power fist. The blow struck the warrior's breastplate and drove him backward through two of his brothers. Ceramite folded inward, ribs shattered. Both hearts ruptured against the spine. The impact sent fragments of broken armor through the legionary behind him, puncturing one throat and splitting another helm. The Justarin closed around the rest. Power axes cut grey plate apart. Fists crushed shoulders and skulls. Combi bolters fired at ranges measured in arm lengths, turning wounds into open caverns. The wolves killed in return. A frost blade entered the joint beneath one Terminator's arm and severed the limb. Another Justarin fell when three Fenrisians dragged him down and drove axes repeatedly into his gorget until the head inside became pulp. Every dead warrior in black plate cost the wolves several of their own. Abaddon accepted the exchange. The Justarin were not invulnerable. They were simply willing to turn every corridor into a calculation the enemy could not survive. Broad Tearfinger reached the magazine complex by following Blind Ragnar into a wall. The passage had ended at a sealed bulkhead without markings. Every schematic insisted that a reactor conduit lay beyond it. Ragnar stood before the metal, head tilted. "There is open space behind this." Enrir the Fat struck the wall with his gauntlet. "The ship says otherwise. The ship lies. The ship has better maps than you. I do not use maps." Gren the Happy laughed. Blood had dried across the lower half of his helm from a wound taken 3 decks earlier. That explains our progress. Chattering Floker kept speaking as Himmlich placed melter charges around the bulkhead. We should have gone upward. I said upward. Nobody listens because Ragnar makes mystery from blindness, and Bror enjoys following fools into sealed walls. When this opens onto a sewage reservoir, I will demand an apology. Bror looked at him. You may demand it from the War Master. Floker paused. That seems an excessive chain of command for a simple admission of error. The charges detonated. White fire cut through the bulkhead. The metal sagged inward, then collapsed in a molten sheet. Beyond lay the magazine complex. Rows of armored vaults extended through a chamber large enough to hold a warship. Ammunition elevators climbed into darkness. Shells the size of hab chambers rested in gravitic cradles. Torpedo warheads hung behind layered shielding. Hundreds of mortal handlers and servitors moved beneath them. The nearest armsman stared at the breach. Bror opened fire. His pack entered the chamber behind a storm of bolter shells. Men burst apart between the ammunition racks. One shell struck an armsman in the shoulder and detonated through the upper torso, throwing his head and one arm across a loading rail. Another man turned to run and lost both legs at the knees. He struck the deck face first and crawled through his own blood until Enrir stamped through his spine. Himmlich, Bror said. The demolition bearer moved toward the first magazine cradle. The others formed a moving wall around him. Gren fired while laughing. His bolter bucked in his hands. Each shot tore another body open. A crewman charging with a boarding axe lost his chest and struck Gren in pieces. Blood and strips of lungs slid down the wolf's armor. Sons of Horus reserves entered from the far gantries. Their first volley struck the pack. A bane strike round hit Gren's helm beneath the left eye. The shell penetrated and detonated inside his face. Half the helmet disappeared. Bone, teeth, and one eye sprayed across Bror's pauldron. Gren staggered. Then he laughed again. The sound emerged, broken and bubbling through a mouth that no longer possessed one side. His tongue hung from the exposed ruin of his jaw. He fired until his bolter emptied, dropped it, and charged with a chain blade. Still handsome, Floker transmitted. Gren answered with a wet howl. He struck the Sons of Horus line before a second volley could form. His chainsword entered one legionary beneath the chin and erupted through the top of the helm. A power axe opened Gren from shoulder to hip. He remained upright long enough to spit blood into the faceplate of the warrior who killed him. Then the axe came free, and his body fell apart. Himmlich armed the first charge. Primary chain established. How many more? Bror asked. Enough. That is not a number. It is the only useful one. More Sons of Horus entered the magazine. Behind them came black-armored giants. Abaddon saw the knight-errant insignia upon Bror Tirefinger's plate. It had been scarred and half-hidden beneath Fenrisian markings, but the symbol remained visible. The first captain recognized it. His mind returned to earlier wounds inflicted upon the vengeful spirit. Intruders moving through hidden routes. Sabotage conducted with knowledge no common raider should have possessed. The ship had been violated before Trisolian, and this wolf carried the mark of men who served beyond ordinary legion command. Take the leader alive, Abaddon ordered. A Justerin warrior turned his helm toward him. Alive? If possible. The qualification mattered. Abaddon wanted knowledge, not mercy. Captured enemies could be opened, questioned, and made examples of. A warrior's silence could be broken through the flesh of his brothers if necessary. Bror heard the command across an unsecured channel. He laughed once. Did you hear that? Enrir asked. I did. Do you intend to cooperate? No. Good. I dislike changes to the plan. Grimner Blackblood watched the distance grow between Russ and the warriors following him. The Wolf King advanced too quickly. He cut through each defensive line before the rear packs could consolidate. His Wolf Guard kept pace because they had been bred, armed, and chosen to stand near a Primarch. The line warriors behind them were forced to fight through everything Russ left alive. everything Horus sent through adjoining corridors, and everything the changing ship placed in their path. The route was stretching. A stretched formation became a series of isolated deaths. Grimnar did not ask Russ to slow. The Primarch would not. More importantly, slowing might cost the only opportunity that mattered. Grimnar opened the command channel. Rear packs, fortify every junction already taken. Stack the dead if you need walls. Mine the passages behind you. Hold until the pack ahead is through, then withdraw in order. A Jarl answered through heavy interference. We cannot hold all of them. You do not need to. Which ones do we abandon? The ones you die in. Silence followed. Then the Jarl laughed. Understood. Grimnar looked toward Russ. The Primarch had reached another junction and was tearing open a sealed door with the spear. White light poured through the widening breach. Sons of Horus fired from the other side. Bolts struck Russ's armor and detonated without slowing him. The Wolf Guard formed around their father. Grimnar turned back to the rear. He placed Huskarls at the principal approaches and ordered wounded warriors dragged into defensible alcoves. Those unable to move were given ammunition and grenades. No promises were made regarding retrieval. A wolf missing one leg looked up at him. How long? Until you cannot hear us. And after? Kill anything that comes. The warrior nodded. Grimnar placed a fresh magazine beside him and moved on. The work was protective. It was also a sentence of death. He delivered both with the same steady voice. In the magazine complex, Himmlich reached the second gravitic cradle. Bolter fire tore across the gantry. A shell struck his demolition harness. Warning runes flashed. Braw seized him and pulled him behind a loading column before the next burst arrived. Damage? Containment remains stable. Can you arm the charges? Yes. Then why are you still speaking? Himmlich returned to work. Blind Ragnar stood in darkness. The chamber lights had failed beneath weapons fire. Smoke and metal dust blinded ordinary sensors. Ragnar moved by sound, vibration, and the faint pressure of enemies crossing the deck. A Sons of Horus legionary approached from his left. Ragnar turned before the warrior fired and drove an axe into the throat seal. The blade cut through the gorget and opened the neck. Blood flooded across both suits of armor. Another came from behind. Ragnar ducked beneath the chain axe and struck backward. His weapon entered the enemy's groin. He tore upward, opening the pelvis and lower abdomen. Intestines spilled over his gauntlet. His sensor veins sparked. A Justarin combi bolter fired. Rounds struck Ragnar's head and shoulders. One tore away the sensor array. Another penetrated the side of his helm and burst within. Darkness became absolute. Ragnar remained standing. He listened. Boots struck the gantry. He swung toward the sound and cut a mortal armsman in half. A second set of steps approached, heavier and slower. Ragnar charged. He struck the Justarin's breastplate. The axe bit, but did not penetrate deeply enough. The Terminator caught him with a power fist. Ragnar's torso collapsed. The fist drove breastplate, ribs, lungs and hearts into the spine. Blood erupted from his helm grill in a thick sheet. The Justarin released him, and the dead wolf folded around the crater in his own chest. Enrir roared and attacked. He struck the Terminator from the side, driving both of them against an ammunition cradle. Metal supports bent. The Justarin's power axe opened Enrir's abdomen, but the wolf locked both arms around his enemy and refused to release him. A gravitic hoist descended above them. Abaddon triggered it. The machine slammed down. Enrir and the Justarin vanished beneath tons of loading machinery. Black and grey armor burst outward. Blood spread from beneath the hoist in two widening pools. Flocker fired continuously. His Vox channel remained open. You black-plated bastards move slowly. Is that pride or structural failure? Your father should have built wider corridors. Your ships smell of old sweat and Chthonian sewer water. I have met Grox with cleaner heraldry. A bolt struck his thigh and removed the leg. Flocker fell, still firing. Another round tore away his left hand. You missed my mouth, he said. Abaddon reached him. Floka looked up from the deck. The first captain raised his power fist. "So this is Horus's most obedient son," Floka said. "I expected taller." Abaddon brought the fist down. Floka's head and upper torso disappeared beneath the impact. Armor, skull, and ribcage became a flattened mass against the gantry. The Vox channel emitted static, then silence. Himmlich armed the final sequence. "Ready." Bror looked around. Only the two of them remained. Justerin closed from both sides. Sons of Horus occupied the lower deck. Abaddon stood beyond them, his black armor spattered with Fenrisian blood. "Surrender," the first captain said. Bror glanced at Himmlich. The demolition bearer placed his hand upon the trigger. "Were we invited to surrender?" he asked. "We were." "That is courteous." Bror raised his bolter. "We decline." Himmlich activated the charges. The nearest magazine detonated. There was no single sound. There was pressure, light, and the violent end of everything within reach. Melter charges breached the containment vault. Gravitic detonators collapsed the support field around the macro shells. Ammunition crashed together. Warheads cooked off in sequence. Himmlich vanished. His armor, flesh, and demolition harness became vapor inside the first flash. The explosion folded decks upward. Mortal handlers disappeared as shadows burned onto metal. Sons of Horus were torn into fragments and hurled through adjoining compartments. A burning macro shell broke free from its cradle and ricocheted through the chamber, crushing armsmen into streaks of blood before detonating against a blast wall. The vengeful spirit convulsed. Whole gantries collapsed. Bror was thrown across the magazine and struck a fractured support beam. His armor broke at the ribs. He tasted blood. Justerin died in the blast. Others rose from the wreckage, black plate burning. The flagship survived. Bror pushed himself upright. Abaddon came through the smoke. The first captain's armor was scorched. One pauldron had been split. He carried no ranged weapon now. His power fist burned around one hand, and a long blade filled the other. "Alive," Abaddon said. "That was the offer." Bror spat blood onto the deck. "You may preserve the corpse." He attacked. Speed carried him inside Abaddon's first strike. Bror's blade cut across the first captain's breastplate and opened a bright line through the black ceramite. He turned, drove one shoulder into Abaddon, and struck again toward the throat. Abaddon caught the blade in his power fist. The weapon screamed between energized fingers. Bror released it and drove a knife into the joint behind Abaddon's knee. The first captain staggered. Respect entered his movements, not hesitation. Abaddon struck Bror across the chest with the back of his fist. The blow hurled the wolf into a fractured cradle. Bror rose before the metal stopped shaking. He charged again. His knife entered Abaddon's side. Abaddon drove his head into Bror's faceplate. The helm split. Bror's nose and cheekbones collapsed. Blood filled his mouth. Abaddon seized him by the gorget and lifted him. "Kneel." Bror's broken face twisted into a smile. He drove the knife deeper. Abaddon's blade entered beneath Bror's breastplate and passed through both hearts. The wolf jerked. Blood poured from his mouth. Abaddon held him upright until the struggling ceased. Then he withdrew the blade and let the body fall. "Leave him," he ordered. A Justerin looked toward the burning magazines. "The damage control teams will clear this section." "Not him." Abaddon looked down at Bror Tyrfinger. "Let Russ's sons see what their hidden knives purchased." A command rune flashed across his visor. The inner defense had been breached. Abaddon understood the battle in full. The sabotage systems, the sacrificed packs, the attacks upon magazines and transit routes. None had been intended to defeat the flagship. They had cleared a road. Russ was already walking it. "First Captain," said a Justerin officer, "the War Master's chamber is threatened." Abaddon turned toward the exit. "Advance." They reached the next junction and found it blocked by wolves. Grey-armored warriors stood behind a barricade of corpses. Wounded legionaries knelt between them, bolters resting upon the bodies of their dead brothers. Grenades had been fixed to the walls. Frost axes waited above the shield line. The leading wolf struck his weapon against his plate. "No passage," he said. Abaddon raised his blade. The Justarin advanced. Beyond them, Grimner Blackblood followed Leman Russ through the opened threshold. The chamber ahead was vast and circular, its walls lost in shadow. Red light bled from cracks in the deck. Justarin stood around its perimeter like black statues, weapons ready. Blood already covered the floor. Some of it belonged to wolves. Most did not. Russ entered first. Grimner and the Wolf Guard followed. At the chamber's far end stood Horus Lupercal. He appeared larger than Russ remembered. The serpent's scales enclosed him in blackness and gold. Worldbreaker rested within one hand. The talon covered the other, its claws surrounded by a field that made the air bleed sparks. A red halo burned behind him. Shapes moved within it. Faces formed, screamed, and sank back into the light. The War Master looked across the blood-slicked floor at his brother. Russ lowered the spear. For one moment, neither Primarch moved. Then Horus smiled. For several heartbeats, the war became quiet. The thunder of bolters beyond the chamber walls dwindled into a distant vibration. Warning klaxons sounded as though submerged beneath black water. Even the cries of the wounded seemed to recede before the silence between the two Primarchs. Leman Russ stood amid the dead with the spear held low. Blood ran from its blade. Some of it belonged to sons of Horus. Some belonged to things that had worn the flesh of legionaries until the spear's light tore them free. The pale radiance surrounding the weapon cast hard shadows across the armor of Alavagar and revealed every fresh gouge in its blackened plates. Across the chamber, Horus Lupercal smiled at him. The War Master appeared untouched by the violence consuming his flagship. The serpent's scales enclosed him in polished darkness, every engraved plate edged in gold. Worldbreaker rested against one shoulder. The talon covered his opposite hand, its long claws surrounded by a distortion field that filled the air with the stink of storms and burned metal. Behind Horus, the red halo turned slowly. Faces moved within it. Some wore crowns, some had horns. Others possessed no features beyond mouths, opening in silent adoration. Russ had seen enough of the warp to recognize hunger when it pretended to be majesty. Horus stepped forward. "Leman." He spoke the name softly. Not Wolf King, not Executioner, not Savage. Leman, the name their father had given him before Fenris had given him everything else. Russ tightened his grip upon the spear. Horus glanced toward the warriors around them. Justarin stood in a wide circle, black cataphracti armor marked by soot and Fenrisian blood. Grimner Blackblood and the Wolf Guard formed behind Russ, their shields locked, weapons raised. "Must they continue?" Horus asked. Russ looked at the bodies beneath his boots. "You began this." "I began nothing. I merely refused to kneel when our father revealed the truth of his ambitions." "That is a pleasing song. Does it improve with every world you burn?" Horus's smile remained. Still the same teeth. Still the same lies. The War Master moved closer. Worldbreaker lowered from his shoulder, though he did not yet raise it to strike. "Do you remember our first feast together?" Horus asked. "Before the others were found. Before father gathered enough sons around him to pretend he had built a family." Russ remembered. He remembered torchlight upon polished stone. Horus laughing as Fenrisian warriors drank beneath the disapproving gaze of Terran officers. The first son and the second, each measuring the other through stories, threats, and contests that had seemed meaningless to everyone except themselves. Horus had understood him more quickly than most. That was what made the memory dangerous. "You called me the hound at his heel," Russ said. "You called me a perfumed courtier. You were perfumed. I had spent too long among diplomats. You spent too long listening to yourself." Horus laughed. For an instant, the sound belonged to the brother Russ had known. Warm, easy, free of the layered resonance that now followed every word. "You see," Horus said, Nothing essential between us has changed. Russ looked beyond him. The chamber walls pulsed with veins of dim crimson light. Cables moved within ruptured conduits like exposed nerves. Sons of Horus dead lay among the remains of wolves, their blood mingling in the deck's drainage channels. A possessed warrior had been split open near the threshold. Something inside the corpse continued breathing. "Everything has changed," Russ said. "Only your understanding." Horus opened the talon. The claws hummed. "We were made as weapons, not sons, not heirs. Weapons shaped around stolen power and dressed in human flesh so that we would believe ourselves beloved." Russ felt the wound in his chest ache. The memory of Surta's door returned in fragments. Infants beneath glass, shadows pressing against the walls of the material universe. The Emperor standing amid a design too vast to be named and too deliberate to be mistaken for birth. Horus saw recognition upon his face. "There," the War Master said. "You know it." Russ gave no answer. "Our father concealed our nature because truth would have freed us from obedience. He called you his executioner so that you would take pride in the chain. He allowed you to build a legend around duty because the legend made you easier to command. You speak of chains while wearing 4 around your throat." The red halo darkened. Horus's eyes narrowed. Russ pointed the spear toward the shapes moving behind him. "They whisper, and you call it revelation. They feed upon you, and you call it strength. You exchanged one master for a pack of them. They are not my masters. Then silence them." The chamber temperature dropped. Ice formed across the blood at Russ's feet. Shadows stretched away from Horus, lengthening against the direction of the light. The War Master's voice remained quiet. "I have done what none of us dared. I entered the darkness and took its power for myself. And how much have you returned? All that matters." Horus lifted the talon and indicated the warriors surrounding Russ. "You came here because some part of you already understands. Join me. Stand at my side as you should have stood from the beginning. The Emperor feared your strength. I will give it purpose. You would make me executioner again." "No, brother." The word passed through Russ like a blade seeking an old scar. Horus came 1 pace nearer. "Think of what we could end. No more lies from terror. No more wars fought for a vision that was never ours. The Imperium could belong to those who built it." Russ looked at him. The accusation against the Emperor held truth. Their father had concealed too much. He had demanded faith while preaching reason, obedience while promising enlightenment. He had created sons for war and offered them love only when love served command. Russ knew it. Knowledge did not make Horus right. It only made the choice uglier. A chain does not become a crown because you chose the hand that holds it. Horus stopped smiling. The red halo opened. It became a wound in reality, vast and wet and burning around the edges. Shapes pushed against its depths. Claws raked the other side of the world. The chamber lights died, leaving only the spear's white flame and the crimson abyss behind the War Master. "You came here with fewer than half the ships required to escape," Horus said. "Your fleet is breaking. Your sons are dying in my corridors. Your legion will be extinguished before this battle ends." Russ showed his teeth. "We knew." The answer cracked something in Horus's composure. He had expected rage, defiance, a father's fear for his sons. Russ gave him none of those things. The wolves had entered the flagship knowing what waited. Their deaths could not be threatened because they had already been offered. "You brought them here to die," Horus said. "So did you." A Justarian officer fired. The bolt struck a Wolfguard shield and detonated against its rim. Silence ended. The chamber erupted. Grimnar roared an order. The Wolfguard advanced behind interlocked shields. Justarian combi bolters opened fire. Mass reactive rounds hammering the formation at ranges measured in meters. The first shield split. A Bane strike round penetrated and struck the warrior behind it in the throat. The detonation removed his head and sprayed fragments of spine through the wolves following him. Power fists met shield faces. Ceramite folded. Arms broke. A Justarin seized one Huskarl by the shoulder and drove his fist through the breastplate. Ribs burst from the legionary's back. His hearts came apart around the black gauntlet. The Huskarl locked both arms around the Terminator and held him in place while Grimnar's frost axe entered the joint beneath the helm. The Justarin's head fell. His body remained upright, crushing the dying wolf beneath its weight. Bolter fire crossed through the press. Warriors fired into one another at distances too close for evasion. Shells detonated inside chests and abdomens. Heads burst into red clouds. A wolf's torso opened from collar to hip, throwing organs across the boarding shield of the warrior beside him. Grimnar drove the formation forward. "Clear the ring," he ordered. "Leave the center." The wolf guard understood. The Primarchs required no protection from ordinary weapons. Everyone else in the chamber would die simply by remaining near them. Horus moved first. Worldbreaker struck the deck. The impact cratered the metal and hurled a wave of force across the chamber. Justarin and wolves were lifted from their feet. One Huskarl struck the wall hard enough to flatten the rear of his skull. Another was torn in half at the waist by the pressure alone. Russ leapt above the shockwave. The spear thrust toward Horus's face. The Warmaster turned. The blade passed close enough to cut a bright line across his cheek. Blood appeared. It was almost black. Russ landed and drove Mjolnir toward the joint beneath the talon. Horus caught the sword upon Worldbreaker's haft. The collision screamed through the chamber. Russ stepped aside before the mace reversed. Worldbreaker passed his helm and struck a Justarin behind him. The Terminator's armor collapsed inward. Blood and pulverized flesh burst from every joint, coating Horus's arm. The Warmaster did not look at the warrior he had killed. He opened his clawed hand. Gravity turned sideways. Russ was thrown across the chamber. His maglocks tore trenches through the deck before releasing. He struck a pillar hard enough to split it from floor to ceiling. Phantom claws descended from the darkness. They passed through armor without marking it and tore at the flesh beneath. Russ felt talons rake across his hearts. His lungs tightened. Blood filled his mouth. The spear flared. White fire spread from its haft across his body. The claws dissolved. The darkness recoiled with a sound like a multitude inhaling through dead throats. Horus extended the talon. Impossible flame rolled from his fingers. It burned in colors Russ's eyes could perceive, but his mind refused to name. The fire crossed the chamber, passing through Justarin and wolves without touching them, seeking only the Wolf King. Russ drove the spear into the deck. Light erupted around him. The fire divided against it. One stream struck the wall and transformed the metal into a surface of screaming faces. The other entered a wounded wolf. The legionary's armor remained untouched, while his flesh inside withered into ash. The empty plate collapsed. Russ pulled the spear free. "You will fight me with your own hands," he said. Horus's eyes burned. "Gladly." Worldbreaker came down. Russ moved. The mace struck where he had stood and opened the deck. Metal folded into a crater. A shockwave crossed the chamber and burst 3 mortal attendants against a distant wall. Their bodies became sheets of blood and bone fragments beneath the impact. Russ cut at Horus's flank. The spear's edge scored the serpent's scales, but failed to penetrate. Mjolnir followed, striking the seal beneath the pauldron. The sword bit through armor and drew another line of black blood. Horus turned faster than his size allowed. The talon cut across Russ's breastplate. Its claws scored the armor of a Lavagar from shoulder to hip, splitting one plate and exposing the woven protection beneath. Russ ducked under Worldbreaker's return swing and drove his shoulder into Horus's chest. The Warmaster gave one step, only one. Russ thrust for the throat. Horus caught the spear shaft beneath his arm and brought his forehead down against Russ's helm. The impact shattered one eye lens. Russ staggered. Horus struck him in the ribs with Worldbreaker. Armor fractured. The blow lifted Russ from the deck and hurled him through the widening battle between their sons. He struck a Wolfguard warrior, crushing the legionary against the floor. The warrior's torso burst beneath the Primarch's weight. Russ rolled aside. He rose with blood running from his mouth. Inside his body, ribs had broken. One lung bled heavily. A secondary organ near his spine had ruptured. His physiology sealed what wounds it could, but Worldbreaker had turned parts of him into pulp. Horus advanced. Each step cracked the deck. Russ drew him toward the outer ring. The Warmaster swung. Russ slipped past the mace and opened the serpent's scales beneath the ribs. The spear cut deeper this time. Black blood poured from the wound. It hissed upon the deck. Shapes moved inside it, tiny faces forming and dissolving across the surface. Horus looked down. Surprise crossed his face. Russ struck again. Mjolnir entered the gap in the armor and tore through muscle. Horus stepped backward. The movement lasted only an instant, yet every warrior in the chamber saw it. The Warmaster had yielded ground. Russ roared and pressed forward. Spear and sword struck in alternating arcs. Horus blocked with Worldbreaker and the Talon. Sparks and warp lightning filled the chamber. Every impact shattered nearby stone or hurled bodies from their feet. Russ did not fight like a beast. He used the appearance of frenzy to conceal precision. He struck repeatedly at the same damaged seals. He changed rhythm without warning. He yielded space to invite pursuit, then cut across the angle of Horus's advance. Horus learned. Worldbreaker feinted toward Russ's head. The mace changed direction in mid-swing and struck the already damaged breastplate. The armor of a Lavagar split. Russ felt his sternum break. The impact crushed one lung flat and tore the lower edge of a heart. Blood flooded his torso. His body folded around the blow. Horus seized him with the Talon. The claws entered beneath the broken plate. They passed through armor, muscle, and bone. One punctured Russ beneath the ribs and emerged from his back. Another tore through his abdomen. The disruption field awakened inside him. His blood boiled. Veins burst through his organs. Cooked muscle peeled from the claws. The smell of his own burning flesh filled his helm. Horus lifted him from the ground. Russ's boots hung above the deck. The Warmaster looked into his brother's broken face. You were always strongest when another will gave you direction. Blood poured through Russ's teeth. Horus tightened the Talon. A secondary organ ruptured. Part of Russ's liver tore free and slid across the powered claws in blackened pieces. Around them, wolves shouted and tried to break from the Justerin. Grimnar killed one black-armored warrior and charged toward his Primarch, but another Terminator intercepted him. Horus raised Russ higher. This ends here. Russ looked down at the claws inside him. Then he laughed. The sound emerged wet and ragged. Horus's expression changed. Russ had allowed the Talon to catch him. Pain threatened to drown thought, but he had reached the place he needed to be. Inside Worldbreaker's killing arc. Inside Horus's guard. Close enough that the Warmaster's armor filled his vision. Russ planted one boot against Horus's breastplate. He pushed. The claws tore free through a different path. Sections of the armor of a Lavagar remained upon the Talon. So did strips of skin, muscle, and part of Russ's lower ribs. Blood erupted from his opened body. Russ fell. He landed inside Horus's reach. The spear was already moving. Horus saw the thrust. Too late. Russ drove the golden blade beneath the serpent's scales, through the gap he had opened, and toward the Warmaster's heart. The point entered Horus's side. White fire consumed the chamber. The spear of Russ entered Horus Lupercal and found the lie beneath his flesh. White fire erupted from the wound. It did not burn like plasma or promethium. It possessed no heat that the chamber's sensors could measure, yet frost flashed across the blood-slicked deck, and metal ran molten from the walls. Warp lightning crawled over the serpent's scales, following every engraved serpent, every gold-edged plate, and every hidden seam in the Warmaster's armor. Horus screamed. The sound was not one voice. A multitude cried through his throat. Some howled in rage, Some pleaded, some laughed as though the blade had confirmed a prophecy spoken before mankind's first ancestor crawled from the sea. The red halo behind him guttered, flared and collapsed into darkness. Shapes were torn from his body. They came free like parasites dragged from an opened carcass. Vast shadows peeled away from his limbs. Clawed silhouettes writhed across the ceiling. Horned heads emerged through his back, mouths stretching wide as the spear's radiance pulled them from their feast. The things had no stable forms. One became a tower of diseased flesh, its surface swollen with eyes that burst and regrew. Another opened wings made from blades and screaming mouths. A third was nothing but coiling change, color and motion, every transformation leaving behind the rotting corpse of what it had been. The last appeared as a regal absence, a darkness shaped like a king seated upon a throne of skulls. The spear rejected them all. White light drove through the chamber. The shadows ignited without flame, tearing at Horus as they were forced from him. They left wounds where they separated, not in armor or flesh, but in something deeper. Each departing presence took pieces of strength, certainty, and fury with it. Horus saw them, truly saw them, not as patrons, not as powers he had mastered, as mouths. He fell through memory. Molech opened beneath him. The gate waited in a place built before human understanding had learned to name the stars. Its surface was stone, metal, flesh, and nothing at all. He remembered crossing its threshold alone. He remembered the presence of beings whose thoughts had crushed mortal empires into dreams. He remembered refusing to kneel. That memory changed beneath the spear's judgment. He had knelt, not upon his knees, within himself. He saw the bargains he had named conquest. Doors opened in exchange for pieces of him. Strength offered for permission. Knowledge given in return for wounds left unguarded. Every power accepted had been a hook. Every revelation had been a chain made desirable by the promise that he alone was strong enough to wear it. He saw himself returning from the gate. His sons had looked upon him with awe. He had mistaken their fear for proof of ascension. He saw the selves he had buried. Horus the son, Horus the brother, Horus the warrior who had once carried wounded legionaries from battlefields with his own hands. Horus the first found, who had believed the emperor's approval meant love. Horus the war master, who had discovered resentment within that love and fed it until it became the only truth he permitted himself to remember. He saw each self sealed beneath titles, armor and rage. War master, rebel, liberator, chosen of powers he refused to call masters. The spear opened them all. The vengeful spirit disappeared around him. For one impossible instant, Horus stood naked beneath a dead sky. Chains crossed his body from throat to ankle. Some were gold, some were iron, others were made from hands, teeth, and whispering faces. Every chain led upward into darkness. He pulled against them. The darkness pulled back. Horus understood. The revelation did not free him. It merely denied him ignorance. Russ felt the resistance vanish from the spear. His brother sagged around the blade. The pressure filling the chamber diminished. The impossible weight that had bent metal and choked breath withdrew like a storm receding across black water. The walls ceased bleeding. The cracks in the deck lost their crimson radiance. Shadows became only shadows. Russ looked into Horus's face. The monster was gone. Not dead. Gone. For a heartbeat, perhaps less, Leman Russ saw the brother who had first welcomed him beyond Fenris. Horus appeared exhausted. The grandeur had fallen away. He was still immense, still armored in the serpent's scales, still powerful enough to tear war engines apart with his hands. Yet the thing staring back at Russ was no god. It was a wounded man wearing the shape of a Primarch. Black blood ran from Horus's mouth. His eyes had cleared. No alien fire burned within them. Pain crossed his face, followed by recognition and something that might once have been shame. "Leman," he whispered. Russ held the spear inside him. He could finish it. The blade had entered beneath the ribs and passed close to Horus's hearts. One final thrust would drive it through the organs, through the spine, and out between the plates of the War Master's back. Russ possessed the strength. Horus's guard lay open. Worldbreaker hung low. The talon had fallen away from the spear shaft. A fraction of a second remained. Russ hesitated, not from fear, not because Horus had defeated him, because the brother before him looked lost rather than destroyed. The moment was microscopic, too brief for mortal perception, long enough for a Primarch. Russ remembered Torchlight upon Terra, Horus laughing at Fenrisian boasts, Horus standing beside him during the first wars after his recovery, the first brother to address him as an equal rather than an animal dragged from the ice. He asked himself whether something remained that could be brought back. Horus saw the question. He twisted. The movement diverted the spear from its fatal path. The blade tore sideways through his body. It opened muscle, severed vessels, and split reinforced ribs from within. Black blood flooded across the serpent's scales. Pieces of organ struck the deck in steaming clots. Horus roared and wrenched himself backward. The spear remained lodged through his side. Russ tightened both hands around the haft. "Stop!" The word came from him as a command given upon a battlefield. Horus staggered. His face remained clear. His eyes remained his own. Russ saw the wound pulsing around the spear. White light traveled through Horus's veins, revealing a luminous network beneath the skin. Darkness moved within that network, recoiling from the weapon, but not yet returning. "End this," Russ said. Horus stared at him. "Come back to Terra. Submit yourself to the All-Father. Whatever has entered you can be cut out." A ragged laugh escaped Horus. Russ pressed the spear deeper by the width of a finger. Horus's knees nearly failed. "This is not forgiveness," Russ said. "You will return in chains. You will answer for every world, every son, and every oath broken. Father may kill you. Dawn may demand it. I may still do it myself. Mercy," Horus breathed. "Judgment. You offer me a collar. I offer you the chance to remain the one who wears it." Around them, the battle continued. Wulfgard and Justerin killed one another across the outer circle. Grimner Blackblood's frost axe tore into a Terminator's throat seal. The Justerin answered by crushing a Huskarl's skull between both gauntlets. Bone fragments and brain matter spilled across black plate. Bolter fire hammered shields. A wolf fell with his abdomen opened, intestines sliding from his armor as he tried to crawl toward his Primarch. A Justerin missing half his face fired until a frost blade entered his chest and came free through his spine. Neither Russ nor Horus looked away from the other. "You know what they are now," Russ said. "You have seen the chain." "Yes." The answer was lucid. That single word wounded Russ more deeply than denial would have. Horus knew. The spear had shown him. "What I began was necessary," Horus said. Russ's grip tightened. "Necessary?" The Emperor lied to us. He lied to mankind. He gathered every throne beneath his own and named it unity. He destroyed faith while building worship around himself. He made us to conquer an empire we would never inherit. And so you fed it to the warp. I broke the first lock. You opened the door and called the things beyond it allies. I used what was available. They used you." Horus looked toward the dead. For the first time, grief entered his face. Not repentance, grief. "I have spent too much to turn back." Russ felt something cold settle inside him. That is the defense of a coward. It is the truth of command. Every legion that followed me, every world that rose in my name, every son who betrayed his own blood because I promised a future beyond the Emperor's tyranny. You ask me to declare all of them fools. They are fools. They are mine. Horus spoke the words softly. Pride remained within them. Possession. Love twisted until it became justification for any further atrocity. "If I kneel," Horus continued, "then every death becomes waste. Every oath becomes shame. Every sacrifice becomes proof that I was wrong. You were wrong. I was betrayed. You became the betrayal. Horus's expression hardened. The clarity remained. No demon spoke through him. No hidden power forced the answer from his mouth. I will not crawl back to Terra for our father to take me apart and call the pieces justice. Russ searched his brother's face for coercion. He found choice. That was the spear's cruelest revelation. The corruption was real. The powers had buried themselves inside Horus, magnified his pride, fed his resentment, and wrapped their chains around every wound in his soul. Yet Horus had not vanished beneath them. He remained. He understood. He chose rebellion still. Russ's mercy had not uncovered an innocent prisoner trapped inside a monster. It had uncovered a willing traitor who mourned the cost, but would not surrender the cause. I came here to kill you, Russ said. Horus's eyes closed briefly. You should have. The darkness returned. It entered through the wound. The black blood around the spear began to move against gravity, crawling upward along the golden blade in twisting threads. Red light ignited within Horus's chest. The chamber trembled. The deck buckled beneath his feet. The shapes beyond reality gathered close. They forced themselves back into him. Horus arched as shadows plunged through his open wounds. Horns appeared across his brow and vanished. His face became a skull, then a youth, then an aged king with skin drawn tight across ancient bone. Wings unfolded behind him in overlapping silhouettes, each one made of smoke, brass, rot, or screaming fire. The serpent's scales swelled as the body beneath changed. Horus looked larger, then thinner, then vast enough that the chamber seemed contained within his armor. His voice emerged layered with presences that spoke before and after him. You mistook weakness for virtue. Russ tried to drive the spear forward. The talon closed around its haft. Its disruption field screamed against the weapon's light. Horus pulled. Russ held on. The spear tore free through the Warmaster's side, opening the wound from ribs to hip. Blood, fragments of flesh and impossible darkness poured onto the deck. Some of it burned. Some crawled away in finger-like streams. Horus struck with Worldbreaker. Russ raised Mjolnir. The mace shattered the sword. Fragments of the blade spun through the chamber. One entered a Justerin's visor and passed through the head behind it. Another buried itself in a wolf's throat. Worldbreaker continued through the broken guard and struck Russ beneath the shoulder. Armor exploded. The impact broke the upper arm, crushed the shoulder joint, and tore muscle from the bone. Russ spun across the deck, still holding the spear in his other hand. Horus followed. The talon raked downward. Russ rolled. The claws missed his skull and entered the back of a wounded Wolfguard warrior. They passed through plate and spine, lifting the legionary from the deck. The warrior screamed once. Horus flexed the talon. The wolf came apart. His torso split into several pieces. Organs and broken armor showered Russ. One severed arm struck the Primarch across the helm. Russ rose through the remains. He thrust the spear toward Horus's wounded side. Worldbreaker struck the haft and drove the blade into the deck. The shock traveled through Russ's arm. Bones broke in his hand. Fingers bent backward inside the gauntlet. Horus kicked him in the chest. The broken armor of Elavagar collapsed further. Russ flew backward and hit the floor hard enough to crater it. A shattered rib pierced his remaining functional lung. Blood flooded his throat. He forced himself up. Horus was already there. The talon entered Russ's abdomen. Claws passed through torn armor and buried themselves beneath the ribs. Horus dragged upward. Russ's body opened. Muscle tore from his reinforced skeleton. One claw hooked beneath the breastbone and split it. Another passed through a heart and shredded it against the spine. Blood erupted through the wound and across Horus's armor. Russ struck Horus's face with his broken hand. The blow cracked bone. Horus answered with Worldbreaker. The mace hit Russ across the side of the helm. The world turned white. Russ felt himself falling. He struck the deck upon his back. His body no longer answered cleanly. One arm lay twisted beneath him. His legs moved only when pain convinced them to. Blood filled his armor from chest to thigh. hot enough to feel like immersion in a slaughtered animal. The spear lay several meters away. Its light flickered. Horus stood over him. The wound in the War Master's side remained open, leaking black blood and pale brilliance. Every breath drew a tremor through his body. Russ had hurt him more deeply than any weapon should have been able to hurt a Primarch, swollen with the power of gods. It was not enough. Horus lifted Worldbreaker. "You saw a brother and forgot your purpose," he said. Russ tried to reach the spear. His fingers scraped the blood-slicked deck. "Mercy is only weakness," Horus continued, "given a nobler name by our father." The mace rose above his head. Around them, Grimnar and the surviving wolves fought to break through the Justarin. Black-armored warriors closed ranks. Power fists struck. Bolters fired. Bodies burst and fell. Russ looked up at Horus. Worldbreaker descended. A space wolf ran between the mace and his father. The first wolf struck Horus before Worldbreaker reached. Leman Russ. He came from the War Master's left. Grey armor split across the chest, one arm hanging uselessly, and a frost blade locked in his remaining hand. No challenge passed his lips, no saga name, no oath. He simply ran between the mace and his father. Horus turned the blow. Worldbreaker caught the warrior across the breastplate. The armor caved inward until its front touched its back. Ribs, lungs, and hearts collapsed into a single compressed mass. Blood erupted through the gorget and every joint in the plate. The wolf left the deck, struck the chamber wall, and burst apart inside his armor. His corpse fell like a sack filled with shattered stone and liquefied meat. He had achieved nothing. Worldbreaker remained in Horus's hand. Russ remained broken beneath him. The War Master still stood within reach of victory. Yet one heartbeat had passed. A second wolf charged. Horus drove the talon through his face. Powered claws entered the helm, tore through the skull, and emerged from the rear trailing brain matter. The War Master lifted the warrior and hurled him into the advancing wolf guard. 3 fell beneath the corpse. 10 more came through them. Then the chamber filled with wolves. They broke from combat with the Justarin. They climbed over the dead. Wounded warriors dragged themselves forward with one arm, leaving trails of blood and organ fluid behind them. Those without weapons attacked with fists, broken blades, and the jagged ends of shattered bones. None believed he could kill Horus. They attacked because Leman Russ lay helpless beneath him. That was enough. Horus struck. Worldbreaker crushed the first rank. Breastplates collapsed. Bodies broke at the spine and flew backward in pieces. One warrior's head remained inside his helm, while the rest of him was torn away. Another struck the deck without his lower body, intestines spilling from the armor breach in steaming loops. The talon opened and closed. It seized a wolf by the torso and cut through him. Horus threw the upper half into the warriors behind, showering them with blood and shredded organs. He plucked another from the mob, crushed the legionary until the armor split, and flung the ruined body across the chamber. They kept coming. Their axes struck the serpent's scales and left scars across the black plate. Chainswords screamed against gold-edged armor, teeth shattering and spraying fragments across Horus's face. Frostblades sought the wound in his side. Bolters fired so close that detonations scorched the wolves standing beside their targets. Horus became slaughter-given form. He swung Worldbreaker in a wide arc. 5 warriors died. The first was struck through the shoulder and split from neck to hip. The second vanished beneath the impact. Armor and flesh flattened together. The remaining 3 were caught by the force of the blow and hurled across the chamber with bones broken inside intact plate. Blood covered the War Master. It ran through the engravings of the serpent's scales. It filled the seams around his boots. Broken chainswords, severed hands, and fragments of frost axes piled around him. Still, the rout closed. One wolf locked both mag clamps around the War Master's right leg and buried a power knife into the knee joint. Horus tore the legionary in half, but the dead warrior's gauntlets remained fixed to the armor. Another threw himself upon the talon. Its claws passed through his abdomen. He wrapped both arms around the weapon, and held on while his organs boiled inside him. 3 more climbed over his body. They drove axes into the joints of Horus's gauntlet and hammered at the elbow with the pommels of broken swords. One reached the War Master's shoulders and wrapped a chain around his throat. Horus seized him by the head. The talon closed. The helm folded inward. Blood and grey matter streamed between the claws. He hurled the corpse down and stamped through the chest of the wolf clinging to his leg. Armor burst beneath his heel. The body inside spread across the deck in a red sheet. The sheer weight of them slowed him. They could not defeat him. They could delay him. Bjorn entered the chamber through a wall of black armor and Fenrisian dead. His pack had been reduced to 7 warriors. 2 limped. One carried his own severed arm beneath the other, unwilling to leave gene seed and flesh for the enemy. All had exhausted their primary ammunition. They struck the Justarin from behind. Bjorn drove his blade into the joint beneath a Terminator's pauldron. The edge passed through bundled fiber and entered the chest. He twisted until the warriors' hearts opened. The Justarin turned with the sword still inside him. His power fist struck Bjorn across the helm. One eye lens shattered. The impact filled Bjorn's mouth with broken teeth and blood. He released the blade, ducked beneath the return blow, and fired his pistol into the damaged joint. The shell detonated inside the Terminator. Armor bulged. Cooked flesh burst through the breach. The Justarin fell heavily enough to crack the deck. Bjorn climbed over him. "Russ," he transmitted. Static answered. The chamber had become a press of bodies. Wolves threw themselves toward Horus faster than the War Master could tear them apart. Justarin attacked the flanks, cutting down the legionaries trying to reach their father. Bjorn saw Worldbreaker rise above the mob. He saw it descend. A wolf disappeared beneath the mace. Another took his place. Bjorn forced a path through the dead. A wounded Justarin caught his ankle. Bjorn looked down and saw half a face behind a broken visor. The traitor raised a combat blade. Bjorn stamped upon the helm. The first blow cracked it. The second crushed the skull. The third drove fragments of bone into the deck. He found Russ beneath a mound of corpses. 2 wolves lay across the Primarch, both dead. One had lost his head. The other had been opened from shoulder to pelvis, his ribcage spread apart, and his organs hanging onto the floor. They had fallen over their father while attempting to shield him. Bjorn dragged them aside. The armor of a Lavagar had been destroyed. Its breastplate hung open in blackened sections. The abdomen was split. Powered claws had torn through plate, skin and muscle, exposing Russ's reinforced ribs and the ruined organs beneath. Blood flowed from him in thick pulses. Clear and amber fluids from damaged secondary organs mingled with it. One heart no longer beat. The other struggled. Russ's eyes opened. They were unfocused. "Up," he said. He tried to rise. One arm failed beneath him. Bone moved visibly beneath the torn shoulder. His body lifted the width of a hand, then collapsed into the blood. Bjorn knelt beside him. "The spear wounded him," Russ said. His voice rasped through a throat filled with blood. Bjorn saw the weapon lying beyond the dead. Its blade burned pale amid the carnage. "Finish it," Russ ordered. Bjorn looked toward Horus. The War Master stood beneath a mound of attacking wolves. He tore them away from himself and killed them one after another. His wound shone through the serpent's scales, but his strength remained monstrous. Dozens of Justarin still fought around him. Bjorn calculated no route to victory, only a route to more dead. "No," he said. Russ's gaze found him. It sharpened by a fraction. "That was an order. You have spent enough sons. Horus lives. So will you." Bjorn reached beneath his Primarch's ruined armor. Russ attempted to strike him away. The blow possessed no strength. "Coward," the Wolf King breathed. Bjorn lifted him. Pain twisted Russ's face. Blood poured from the open abdomen and ran over Bjorn's arms. "Yes," Bjorn said. "You may punish me when you can stand." Grimner Blackblood saw Bjorn raise the Primarch. That ended the battle. Not the killing. The battle. The spear had failed to end Horus. Russ could no longer fight. Every warrior who remained inside the vengeful spirit would be consumed without altering either truth. Grimnar opened every surviving command channel. The king is down. All packs withdraw. Responses reached him through static. Some acknowledged, some demanded clarification. Others consisted only of gunfire, screams, and the wet snarling of things no longer human. Grimnar reviewed the surviving routes. The flagship changed them even as he watched. Corridors closed. Transit shafts opened into fire or vacuum. Pack markers drifted into walls and vanished. Thousands of wolves would never receive the order. Thousands more would hear it and refuse because enemies stood before them. Grimnar began selecting who would live. Red Hand Pack, hold the axial junction. Their Jarl answered. Withdraw through which route? You do not withdraw. Silence. Then a fist struck a breastplate. Across the Vox. Understood. Blackmore, seal the upper transit and collapse it when the enemy enters. We will be inside. Yes. Another acknowledgement. Frostborn, escort the wounded toward the main hangar. Leave any who cannot maintain pace. A growl answered him. They are our brothers, and the living are mine to preserve. Obey. Grimnar gave each order without ceremony. Seconds had become lives. Every passage held for one moment permitted another pack to retreat. Every warrior abandoned to a rearguard purchased distance for those carrying the wounded. There was no room for tenderness, only the cruel arithmetic of survival. Bjorn carried Russ from the chamber, while wolves died behind them. The survivors formed a moving wall around their Primarch. Boarding shields faced backward. Bolters fired until magazines emptied. Warriors dragged their wounded brothers with one hand and fought with the other. They passed into a corridor filled with the aftermath of an explosion. Metal had folded inward. Bodies lay beneath collapsed gantries. Black and grey armor burned together among shattered ammunition rails. Bjorn saw blind Ragnar first. The warrior's chest had been crushed into his spine. His ruined sensor veins lay scattered around him. Enrir the Fat was visible only as pieces beneath a collapsed loading mechanism. Floka's leg lay several meters from the remains of his torso. Gren's broken face had frozen around what might still have been a grin. Himmlich was gone. Only scorched fragments of plate marked where the demolition bearer had died. Bror Tirefinger lay apart from them. His helm had been broken. His face was ruined. A blade had passed through both hearts. The knight-errant insignia remained visible beneath blood and soot. Bjorn recognized the precision of the killing. Abaddon. A wolf paused beside Bror. Gene seed. No time, Bjorn said. We cannot leave them. Bjorn shifted Russ's weight across his shoulders. Warm blood continued flowing over his armor. We already have. They moved on. The dead remained aboard the enemy flagship. No apothecary reached them. No Skjald spoke their final deeds. No brother closed their eyes or burned their bodies according to Fenrisian custom. The Legion left pieces of itself behind on every deck. The retreat became a running extermination. Sons of Horus fired into the backs of withdrawing packs. Banestrike rounds entered weakened armor and detonated within exposed bodies. Wolves fell without slowing, trampled by brothers who could not stop to lift them. Possessed descended through ruptured ceilings. One dropped into the center of a wounded column, its arms dividing into hooked limbs as it landed. It seized two wolves and tore them apart. Their upper bodies struck opposite walls, while their legs remained standing for a heartbeat. A rune priest drove lightning through the creature. The demon burst from its host in black smoke and burning intestine. It took the priest's head before the remaining wolves hacked it apart. The wounded were carried until carrying them threatened the pack. Then they were lowered against the walls. Grenades were placed beneath hands that could still close around triggers. A legionary with both legs missing looked up at Grimnar as the withdrawal passed him. "Go," he said. Grimnar gave him 3 crack grenades. The wounded wolf smiled. The explosion came moments later. The pursuing sons of Horus vanished in fire and fragments. Bodies layered the corridors, grey upon green, green upon grey. The living climbed over both. Hugin still burned in the main hangar. Its starboard wing was gone. Armor had been torn from the fuselage. One engine coughed black smoke and promethium flame. The pilot reported that the Stormbird might lift. No one asked whether it might land again. Bjorn carried Russ up the assault ramp. The Primarch stirred. "Grimnar, he is behind us. Do not leave him." Bjorn looked back. Grimnar Blackblood stood at the base of the ramp with the remaining Wolfguard. Justerin entered the hangar through 3 access points. Sons of Horus line warriors followed them. Mortal armsmen fired from the gantries above. Grimnar transmitted a single order. "Lift." Bjorn lowered Russ into the troop compartment. "Not yet," the pilot answered. "Another minute and we lose the engines." Outside, Grimnar fired his bolter. The Wolfguard formed around him. Their first volley tore apart the leading armsman. Frost axes met Justerin plate. A Huskarl drove his blade into a Terminator's groin and was crushed beneath a power fist. Another lost his arm, caught the severed limb before it fell, and used the still-locked weapon to strike again. Grimnar's bolter emptied. He threw it aside. His frost axe broke against a Justerin's shoulder guard. The blade shattered. Grimnar reversed the haft and drove the jagged metal through the enemy's visor. Blood flooded across his hands. Sons of Horus closed around him. Grimnar fought among burning corpses with the broken weapon. He killed one warrior by opening the throat seal. He broke another's knee and stamped the traitor's head against the deck. A power blade entered beneath his ribs and emerged from his back. Grimnar caught the attacker by the helm and pulled him close. Too shallow. He drove the broken axe haft through the traitor's eye lens. Bolter fire struck Grimnar from behind. His chest opened. Fragments of lung and heart sprayed across the Stormbird's ramp. He remained standing. Hugin's engines screamed. Bjorn seized the ramp controls. Grimnar looked toward him through a helm filled with blood. "Take him home." The assault ramp began to rise. The last thing Bjorn saw was Grimnar charging the Justerin alone. Hugin lifted. Enemy fire tore across its underside. The Stormbird rolled through the hangar mouth and entered the void, trailing burning fuel. Horus reached the hangar seconds later. Wolves died before him. Worldbreaker crushed the last rearguard against the deck. The Talon tore a wounded Huskarl from the embarkation cradle and scattered him across the burning wreckage. The Warmaster strode toward the open hangar mouth. Hugin was already beyond reach. Then the wound in his side opened. White light burst through the serpent's scales. Horus staggered. One hand struck the deck. Black blood poured between his fingers, threaded with brilliance and crawling shadow. Deep within the vengeful spirit, damaged charges reached a surviving magazine. Warning runes ignited across the flagship. The first detonation shook the hangar. The second tore open the ship's wounded heart. The vengeful spirit convulsed, as though something buried within its iron heart had awakened and begun clawing its way out. The first magazine deck erupted beneath the main axial spine. Armored vaults split open. Macro cannon shells broke from their gravitic cradles and struck one another inside collapsing containment fields. Torpedo warheads ignited among ammunition elevators, packed with mortal handlers, servitors, and wounded warriors. There was no time for screams. The first detonation transformed kilometers of deck into expanding fire. Sons of Horus, surviving wolves and crewmen, were consumed together. Ceramite armor glowed, softened, and ran from bodies as molten slag. Men became silhouettes inside the blaze before the pressure stripped flesh from bone and bone from existence. The explosion punched through the flagship's flank. Armor sections larger than fortress towers tore free and spun into the void. Atmosphere followed in a white torrent, carrying gun carriages, burning servitors, and hundreds of corpses through the wound. One dying wolf emerged from the ruptured hull, still locked in combat with a son of Horus. They turned together in the darkness, hands frozen around one another's throats. A second magazine ignited. The blast traveled upward through transit shafts and ammunition lifts. Fire roared through decks that had survived the boarding assault. Blast doors closed too late and folded beneath the pressure. Crewmen sheltering behind them were crushed between layers of metal, their bodies flattened until blood jetted from the seams. The vengeful spirit lurched from its pursuit vector. Its engines continued burning, but the wounded flagship no longer moved in obedience to them. The detonation had broken the alignment of the great vessel's spine. Thruster banks fired against one another. Entire engineering congregations died attempting to prevent the ship from tearing itself in half. Horus remained on one knee in the hangar. Black blood spread beneath his hand. White brilliance burned inside the wound Russ had given him. Each pulse of light drove needles of pain through his body and sent fragments of memory across his mind. Fenrisian. Laughter. A golden blade. The sight of his brother's face when mercy had entered it. The War Master rose. The deck tilted beneath him. Burning wreckage slid toward the open hangar mouth. Mortal crewmen screamed as they lost their footing and vanished into the void. A damaged Storm Eagle struck the deck, broke apart, and swept a line of armsmen into the darkness with its spinning wing. Abaddon reached Horus through smoke and falling debris. The first captain's black armor bore fresh cuts. Blood ran beneath one pauldron. Several Josterin followed him, fewer than had entered the magazine levels. "The flagship cannot pursue," Abaddon said. Horus looked through the hangar mouth. Hugin was a burning speck in the distance. Beyond it, the Hrafnkel fought its way through the traitor formation. "Restore the engines. The axial damage is severe. Restore them. By the time we regain maneuverability, Russ will be beyond weapons range." The name struck harder than the flagship's convulsion. Horus looked down at the wound in his side. He had won. Russ lay close to death. The 6th Legion was broken across the decks of the vengeful spirit and the burning void beyond. The wolves had failed to kill him. They had failed to capture the flagship. They had failed to halt the march toward Terra. By every measure used by generals, Horus Lupercal had won. Yet the victory tasted of blood and ash. Russ had held the spear within him. Russ had possessed the strength to finish the thrust. Russ had chosen mercy. Horus hated him for it. Hugin crossed the distance to the Hrafnkel beneath a storm of fire. The Stormbird had lost most of one wing. Its remaining engine burned beyond tolerance, filling the troop compartment with smoke and warning alarms. The craft shook so violently that wounded legionaries were thrown from restraint harnesses and struck the walls. Bjorn knelt beside Russ. The Primarch lay upon the deck beneath torn pelts and sections of armor cut away by combat blades. His blood filled the grooves between the plating. Each breath produced a wet, broken sound. The Stormbird rolled. Bjorn caught Russ before the Primarch's body slid across the compartment. The movement opened the wounds further. Dark blood poured from the split abdomen. A loop of intestine forced itself between broken armor plates. One of the surviving apothecaries pressed both hands into the wound. "Hold him still." Bjorn looked at him. "Can you save him?" The apothecary did not answer. Hugin passed beneath the Hrafnkel's wounded shields. A Sons of Horus lance beam followed it. The beam struck the Gloriana's flank and opened another burning trench through its armor. The Stormbird entered the main launch vault as secondary explosions rolled through the deck. Its landing gear failed on contact. Hugin struck the floor. The craft skidded sideways, shedding armor and fire. It smashed through 3 parked gunships and crushed the crews attempting to launch them. Fuel lines ruptured. Burning promethium rolled across the deck. The Stormbird stopped against an embarkation tower. Its hull split open. Bjorn tore away the damaged assault ramp and climbed into the fire with Russ across his shoulders. Mortal deck crews ran toward him. Some carried medici equipment. Others brought gravitic stretchers and cutting instruments large enough to open dreadnought plate. "Clear the way," Bjorn said. No one obeyed quickly enough. He roared. The humans scattered. The Medici crews surrounded Russ once Bjorn lowered him onto the stretcher. Cutting beams passed across the armor of Elavagar. The remaining breastplate separated in molten sections. Apothecaries tore away layers of fiber and leather soaked through with blood. What lay beneath silenced them. Worldbreaker had broken the Primarch from shoulder to hip. Reinforced ribs had splintered inward. One heart had been shredded by the Talon. A lung had collapsed into torn tissue. Secondary organs had ruptured under forces that would have reduced an ordinary legionary to liquid inside his armor. The Talon's disruption field had cooked portions of Russ from within. Muscle had peeled from bone. Blood vessels had burst throughout the abdomen. Sections of flesh surrounding the wounds were black, boiled, and dead. A mortal chirurgeon stared for half a second too long. Bjorn seized him by the throat. "Work." The man's boots left the deck. "I do not know how." "Learn before he dies." An apothecary caught Bjorn's arm. "Release him. We require every hand." Bjorn let the chirurgeon fall. The stretcher moved toward the Medici vault. Blood ran from its edge in a continuous stream. Behind them, the Hrafnkel began to turn. The surviving wolves withdrew from Trisolian. Some ships could still follow, others could not. The Iron Warriors closed their fire corridors. Sons of Horus vessels accelerated around the crippled, vengeful spirit. World Eater's gunships hunted damaged escorts, boarding ships already too wounded to resist. The cruiser Spear of Assaheim lost its engines before reaching the Stellar Straits. Its commander sent no request for assistance. He turned the ship around. The cruiser emptied its remaining weapon stores into the closest Sons of Horus capital ship. Macro shells hammered the enemy's forward shields. Torpedoes opened gaps in the defensive envelope. Then the Spear of Assaheim drove toward it. Traitor guns tore the cruiser apart during the approach. Its prow burned. One flank opened to vacuum. Engine compartments ruptured behind it. The ship continued. Its reactors entered overload. The commander transmitted one word across the fleet channel. "Witness." The cruiser struck the Sons of Horus vessel amidships. Its reactors opened. A temporary sun appeared in the darkness. White fire swallowed both ships. Void shields became luminous shells, held for an instant and collapsed inward. Armor, crew, and machinery were reduced to expanding vapor. The blast consumed nearby gunships and hurled wreckage across the pursuing formation. The survivors gained minutes. Other crippled wolves followed the example. One escort rammed an Iron Warrior's cruiser and detonated its magazines inside the enemy hull. Another turned broadside across the approach, firing until counterfire cut it into burning sections. Mortal crews remained at their stations after every legionary aboard had died. The Hrafnkel entered the Stellar Straits with fewer vessels than had emerged from them. The red suns waited. Radiation storms struck weakened shields. Gravitational tides pulled at broken hulls. A damaged escort lost containment and fell toward the nearest star. Its final transmission, a Fenrisian death chant, spoken by mortal crewmen who had learned the words from their masters. Bjorn heard the chant from beside Russ's Medici cradle. He did not join it. He sat within the surgical vault while machines attempted to keep a Primarch alive. The floor had been washed 3 times. Blood still remained in the seams. Russ lay beneath an arch of Medici instruments. Tubes entered his chest. Mechanical pumps forced blood through organs that refused to function. Clamps held broken ribs apart, while apothecaries removed dead tissue from around the remaining heart. The spear rested against the wall. Its blade had been cleaned. It still seemed stained. Casualty reports entered Bjorn's display one after another. Several great companies possessed fewer than 1 warrior in 5. Entire packs had vanished aboard the vengeful spirit. Their signals had ceased without witnesses. Their gene seed remained inside bodies burning in enemy corridors or drifting through space. The apothecaries had returned with almost empty vaults. Many receptacles remained unused because those tasked with recovering the fallen had died beside them. The future of thousands of warriors had been abandoned with their corpses. The 6th Legion survived. It was no longer the Legion that had left Terra. Bjorn looked at Russ. Anger came easily. Horus had done this. The thought was true. It was also incomplete. Russ had led them into the Stellar Straits. Russ had spent ships for hours and warriors for seconds. He had known the price before the fleet left Fenris. He had watched every death enter the ledger and refused to turn aside. Bjorn hated him for that. He loved him for refusing to lie about it. The spear had reached Horus because Braur's pack had died in the magazines, because Grimner had held the embarkation route, because nameless wolves had thrown their bodies against a Primarch they could never hope to wound. Every death had created the opening. Russ had used it. Then he had spared his brother. Bjorn's anger found no clean target. That was the worst of it. Horus walked the ruined halls of his flagship after the fires were contained. Bodies filled the corridors. Sons of Horus lay beside wolves in armor burned beyond recognition. Mortal crewmen had died in heaps around sealed blast doors. Some had been cooked alive when fire entered the ventilation systems. Others had suffocated inside compartments spared from flame, but cut away from air. The flagship's servitors gathered the dead. They sorted bodies according to utility. Gene seed was removed from fallen suns. Armor was cut apart for repair. The wolves were stripped of weapons, trophies, and plate before their remains were fed into rendering furnaces. Horus ordered Braur Tyrfinger's body brought before him. The corpse lay upon a maintenance slab. Abaddon stood beside it. "This one reached the magazines," the first captain said. "He carried the knight-errant mark." Horus examined the dead wolf's ruined face. "He mattered. He is dead." They all mattered. That was Russ's weapon. Abaddon waited. Horus touched the wound in his side. Pain answered. "Pursue them." The first captain's eyes hardened with anticipation. With what strength? Whatever ships can still move. Russ must not recover. His legion must not rebuild. The survivors are traveling toward Yarant. Then Yarant will become their grave. Abaddon struck one fist against his breastplate. The hunt began. At Yarant, the wolves prepared to die. Their damaged ships gathered around a world that offered no salvation. Ammunition was counted. Wounded warriors were armed where possible. Those unable to stand were placed beside firing positions so they could die facing the enemy. Russ remained unconscious. The Medici engines sustained him, but no voice reached him. Not Bjorn's, not the rune priests, not the growling chants spoken by the remnants of the Legion. Abaddon's forces closed. The 6th Legion formed its last defensive lines. Then the sons of Korax came from the darkness. The Raven Guard struck the traitor pursuit with the sudden violence of blades released from shadow. Gunships tore through boarding formations. Warships hidden by silence and patience opened fire into exposed flanks. Korax did not bring enough strength to win a greater war, but he brought enough to deny Abaddon the execution he desired. The remnants escaped. Russ woke later. There was no triumph in him. He opened his eyes among the suns he had nearly destroyed and asked first for the dead. No one possessed a complete answer. When the spear of Russ was brought before him, he refused to take it. Bjorn stood at the foot of the Medici throne. Russ looked at the weapon as though it carried every face lost at Trisolian. "You bear it," he said. Bjorn's jaw tightened. "I do not want it. Neither did I. That is poor reason. It is the truest reason I have." Bjorn accepted the spear. The weapon felt cold within his hand. Far away, near Beta Garman, the wound opened again. Horus stood among his commanders when the serpent's scales split at the side. White light poured through the breach. Black blood followed, flowing across the armor in twisting streams. The Warmaster fell. His sons carried him from the strategium, while the powers within him turned against one another. The truth forced upon him by the spear had left doubt inside the vessel they claimed. Each god sought to tear that doubt apart or claim it for itself. Horus sank into a death-like sleep. The traitor command fractured around his silence. Malagurst entered the darkness after him. The twisted sun gave what remained of himself to break the last resisting fragment within his father. His sacrifice restored Horus to waking, but what returned possessed less of the brother Russ had spared. The War Master opened his eyes. The chains remained. He no longer cared to see them. On one side of the war, Leman Russ lay among the remnants of sons he had knowingly sacrificed. On the other, Horus rose only by surrendering more of himself to the powers he had called servants. The Wolf King had failed to kill his brother. His wound had helped kill what remained of Horus Lupercal. The Wolf King spared a brother, and in doing so helped preserve a monster.